everybody's well as we continue to navigate carefully and cautiously through this pandemic. As chair of the Exeter Select Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Public notice of this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street on November 20th. As provided in that public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone. We remind the public that the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. All votes taken tonight during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. And I'll start now by introducing the members of the Select Board and ask that I'll do that by roll call attendance. When each member is introduced, if you would, state your presence and also whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting and who that person may be, which is required under the right to know law. So we'll start with you. Oh, Selectwoman Rountriolo, how are you? We'll start with you.
Okay, I'm here. I'm by myself.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Selectman Brown.
I'm here. I'm alone.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. And the clerk, Selectwoman Julie Gilman.
I am in my office. I'm alone. I will probably keep myself muted a lot because my cat is here and has discovered my drawings from my HDC meeting, and they are a nice scratchy piece of paper.
Great, thank you. And the Vice Chair of the Select Board, Selectwoman Cowan. Good evening.
Hi, everybody. I'm here. I'm mostly alone.
And again, I'm Nico. Oh, sorry.
There might be little people in and out, but mostly alone.
Terrific. Thank you. I'm Nico Papakos-Sindis, Chair of the Select Board, and I'm alone in the room. We also have our Town Manager, Mr. Dean. Good evening.
Good evening. Hope everyone is staying healthy, doing their best.
And you're alone?
Whoops. I am alone in the office, yes.
Okay, terrific. We'll start this evening. We have 4 board interviews scheduled, 1 for the Conservation Commission, 1 for the Sustainability Committee, and 2 for our newly created Arts and Culture Commission. So we'll start in the order that's in the packet. First up, we have Connor Madison with us this evening, who has filed an application of interest for the Exeter Conservation Commission. Good evening, Connor.
Hi, nice to meet everybody. I hope you guys can hear me fine.
We can see and hear you great. Thank you. And thank you for your interest and thank you for your application. We've had an opportunity to review it and your CV. And if you would just take a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in the CONCOM. And the board will ask some questions of you. And then we will take up your appointment at the December 7th meeting.
Cool. So a bit of background on me. I went to I'm originally from New Jersey. Went to UNH for undergrad for environmental science, then went for a grad degree. So I have my master's in natural resources. I've moved around a bit, but I've been in Exeter for now about 3 years. I work for GZA Geoenvironmental. So we're an environmental consulting firm. I've been here for about 3, almost 4 years, doing projects all across New England. I've been down to Florida. I've been up in Michigan doing some groundwater PFAS sampling. But mainly I'm just here in New Hampshire doing permitting for mostly linear projects, mostly utilities. We do a lot of delineations and interesting. We're on this new AOT track. So AOT just changed their permitting. So now we have to do wildlife assessments. So I've been doing a lot of those for the past couple of weeks. But my interest in the Conservation Commission kind of stems from that. I present probably at least once a month to conservation commissions all across the state, LACs, planning board, zoning boards. So it'll be my first one to sit on. So I'm excited.
Terrific. Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman, since you're the select board rep to the Conservation Commission, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Connor, I think this is a really good fit. I don't really have any questions for you because what you've just said there and what you've shown us in your application fit very nicely with the people who are currently on the board. Some of the things that you talk about are actually a little over my head, but very interesting. So I have no questions.
Thank you. Selectman Brown?
Yep. I had a question about, based on your expertise, the wetlands, groundwater situation in Exeter. Any thoughts you have about our water situation and our conservation efforts and the overlaps there?
Yeah, so we actually have a couple sites. I think GZA samples your landfill monthly. I definitely buy my own water. No offense to the water situation. You guys know that you can. I've just got off of a big PFAS, so I think that's the next one that's up and coming. I'm not sure about Exeter's PFAS situation, but just the apartment building I'm in doesn't have great drinking water as far as taste goes, so I don't have too much expertise on that.
Yeah, it was more like about development and drought situation, all that. Sort of the bigger picture underground, and if there's a correlation between development, conservation, and recovering the health of the water.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have too much history on even actually where Exeter receives their water from. If you guys, I know that we're all on city water, but
you're beyond my. I can talk to. I have a well, but I just figured you. But I'm sure your ability to access information is deeper and broader than mine. So
yeah, if you're on a well, I definitely have been on quite a few drawdown projects in the middle of July where we assess how much water we can take out. I was on that Oyster River and the kettle bog where they diverted water into a kettle bog to hold for their summers. So I have experience with drawdown. I don't see any concern with Exeter as of now, but it's definitely something to look after.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Selectman Brown. Selectwoman Brown Triolaf? No, okay. And Selectwoman Cowan?
I don't have any questions, but thank you so much for applying. We're always really excited to get new people in, especially people with a deep understanding of the issues and the ability to dive into our specific issues. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I agree, Connor. I don't have any questions. I mean, your CV speaks for itself, and your qualifications are there. I'm appreciative of your interest, and we'll look forward to taking up your appointment at the next meeting.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you for your time tonight.
Mr. Chair, before Connor leaves, can I jump in with a quick question?
Of course.
Sorry to interrupt. I noticed on the resume that, Connor, you do work with GZA, and GZA is also a contractor with us with our landfill. So I just want to make sure, are you doing any work for the town of Exeter right now or not?
I am not in that group. That is the environmental group. I'm in the natural resource and ecology group.
Okay.
So I don't groundwater sample. I'm strictly permitting and large construction projects.
Okay. Just needed to check in case something with the Conservation Commission needed a ruling or what have you. It wouldn't necessarily disqualify you, but it's something we'd want to know about. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you, Mr. Dean. Good question. Okay. Thanks again, Connor, and we'll take the matter up at our December 7th meeting.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Our next applicant is Adam Dumbill, who has filled out an application for the Sustainability Advisory Committee. We have one open seat there. Good evening, Adam.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Select Board. How's everyone doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me for an interview.
Thank you for applying, and thank you for your time this evening. Again, if you could, we reviewed your application and your CV. If you could just spend a couple minutes talking about your interest in the Sustainability Advisory Committee, and then we can take up some questions.
Absolutely. It's funny because Connor and I have many of the similar background, I think, and we actually both grew up in New Jersey. So I'm originally from New Jersey. I went to law school at Vermont Law School and graduated in 2011. I've been working at McLean Middleton as an attorney, and I'm now a director and vice chair of the Administrative Law Department. My practice focuses solely on environmental and energy issues. We are currently already working with the town of Exeter on a number of issues. My wife and I and two children live here in town. And I have been interested in trying to find a place to volunteer and get involved in the community. My wife is a community specialist at the Environmental Protection Agency, where we actually met when I was interning there in law school. So we both have environmental focus in our careers, and a love for the outdoors, and a love for our community. And this is just some way that I'd like to be able to try and give back to the community that we love so much.
Terrific. Thank you. And this is an excellent time. The Sustainability Advisory Committee was formed, I believe, the late July of last year. So a relatively new committee, but they've done an awful lot of work already and hit the ground running. So it's going to be great to have it fully staffed with all the seats taken. I'm the select board rep, and I do have a question, but I'm going to defer first to the rest of the board. Selectman Brown, do you have any questions?
I guess I would say not to put you on the hot seat, but you're in the hot seat. Any regs, any like government, local government regulations or practices that you could see that would streamline sustainability in the town?
Well, I think I like the fact that we have a composting program. I think that's really important. I think that can certainly be increased and broadened widely. I know that we had a great pumpkin drive here this last year about composting pumpkins, but I think that's, composting is certainly one way that the community as a whole can reduce their impact. It would reduce the amount of material that goes to the landfills in the area. I know Rochester is expanding their landfill, the turnkey landfill, but to the extent, we can try to lessen some of that, I think that would be a good idea. To the extent we can get solar lights installed or fluorescent lights that use less energy in the downtown area, that would also be another potential option. I'm also a proponent of getting rid of plastic bags, for instance. So those are a few things that I think could be discussed and presented to your board for an overall approval at some point, if the advisory committee were to make such recommendations.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Thank you, Selectman Brown. Selectwoman Rountree-Olaf? No? Okay. Selectwoman Gilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Adam, do you, from your experience with representing people before the EPA and DES, have you seen solutions to problems that you can bring to the table, or the outcomes of your representation that other communities are doing that Exeter should take up and make some kind of movement towards?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the town is already making great strides in many different areas. The improvements that the town has made to its wastewater treatment facility go a very, very long way to making our community more sustainable, to reducing impacts on our estuary and the Great Bay estuary. We have done a great job as far as I'm aware, but yes, I've worked with the Department of Environmental Services and EPA on a number of different issues. I've represented the city of Manchester and their wastewater and combined sewer overflow issues. Then we've reached a very promising settlement with the EPA and the Department of Justice. So there are a lot of issues that I think I'd be able to use my expertise and bring to the table in helping the community.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Selectwoman Gilman. Selectwoman Cowan.
Hi, Adam. I don't have any specific questions for you, but just thank you so much for volunteering your time. We are so grateful. It's funny, New Hampshire government is largely run by volunteers. And so the quality of people that you have on committees like this make a real difference. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And Adam, I just have one question that we asked last year of all of the applicants when we first established the committee, that from a 80,000 foot view, how would you define sustainability?
Well, I think it's making the best strides that you possibly can to reduce your overall impact on the community and your environmental surroundings, and trying to make sure that you leave your community and town in a is just as good, if not better, situation for the next generations.
Great, thank you. We will take up your application at the December 7th meeting, but I wanted to thank you again for your time this evening, and thank you for your interest in applying to this committee.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for your volunteerism on the select board as well. It's very much appreciated, and I know you guys put in a lot of work, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
You too, sir. Joining us, we have our recording secretary, Joanna Bartel. Good evening, Joanna.
Hi.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to, sorry about that.
Yep.
I don't mean to interrupt. Just a quick item of business, just so the board is aware and the public is aware. Mr. Dunville does represent us on the EPA permitting process. So through McLean Middleton, they've done a great job representing the town so far. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that. And also, Mr. Dunville will be also representing us on the Pickpocket Dam issue in terms of reviewing the legal issues with Brentwood and so forth. So just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have final two applicants this evening are for the newly established Exeter Arts and Culture Committee. First up, we have Mr. David Druin, who I know was here earlier. David, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. I was so intrigued by all the jargon going back and forth with all the sustainability and environmental stuff, because it's so out of my realm of expertise, and it's super interesting. I was really blown away. It's super cool.
Great. Thank you for your application. Thank you for your time this evening. If you could just take a couple of minutes and give us a little bit about your background and your interest in the committee.
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks so much for all your continued work to better our community. You guys really rule. And thanks for hearing me out a few weeks ago, too. Myself, I've been an artist since the 90s, like full time. It's all I've ever done. That's how I've raised my family. That's how I've done it. I'm currently on a major record label, VPAL Records, one of the biggest reggae record labels in the world. And I won the International Best Artist Award of the Boston Music Awards the last 2 years in a row. New England Music Awards Rock Band of the Year 2 years ago. And been, I'm like 25 years into like Berkeley and touring 180 to 200 days a year. Just put out our 23rd record that I've been like the leader of the band. In the meantime, I'm not from New Jersey. I'm from, I went to high school in Exeter, and my wife is a teacher here in Exeter, and our daughter has lived in Exeter her whole life. And I graduated from Great Bay in Portsmouth, comparative theology and philosophy and stuff like that in the midst of my touring and making records and stuff. My family is heavily involved in the community. My sister owns Ohana Kitchen, which is right downtown, kind of across from Las Olas in that plaza. And I did all like the graphic design and painting in there, even though I'm not really like an artist in that realm. I can still kind of tap into that, but I'm really a musician with like 25 years of like real world, like non-romanticized, struggles and triumphs and victory and glory, and also, defeat and learning a lot by the best way to learn, messing stuff up a bunch of times. And then, so I'm always, willing to learn as I go, but I do think I bring like a lot of like, I already messed that up 20 times. Like kind of like experience, I guess you would call that, to the table, anecdotal and through schooling, which I've always been like an academic first and foremost, and an artist kind of like secondary and as my job, and kind of like a need that I always have to express myself through art.
Terrific. Thank you. And I've heard you perform. You're incredibly talented.
Thank you very much.
We'll start with some questions from the board. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf, we'll start with you.
Hi, Mr. Druin. So nice to have you on board. I'm not going to ask you a ton of questions because, full disclosure, I've both heard you play, heard you speak, been to a few events, might have had you perform at our own private engagement before everything kind of went to Crazyville. So just so that we can have something on record from my perspective, what's one thing that you think you could bring to that you think has crossed your mind that our town could utilize, could have more of? What would benefit us? Because I know you probably have tons of ideas on things that we could be doing better in the realm of art and entertainment and culture.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf, and a good one at that. When I moved to Exeter many, many years ago, it was to gain a level of anonymity because of how popular my groups had gotten in like the Boston and New York and all the way out to Taos, New Mexico and whatnot. And in the sleepy little suburban town that me and my wife decided to settle into and get married and raise our family and whatnot, we got a bird's eye view and out of the forest looking into the trees, look at the local art scene. And the local art scene was not only very difficult to find, because I'm an artist and my wife became a teacher here, we're like looking for it everywhere. And then we see at the time there was like a beer and chili fest thing that would happen. And then we thought like the Revolutionary War thing was kind of cool. But in regards to what I think could change is definitely the same way that we're focusing on local stuff as far as like the EPA and locally sourced food and composting and getting rid of plastic bags and like local, everything being local. I think we could focus a lot more energy on all of the artists that are on major labels and internationally touring artists. We live here. We pay taxes here. Our children go to school. Well, my children is remote, much like Selectwoman Cowan's right now. And we're just teaching her here because we're, very much concerned like everyone else about the global pandemic. Side note, but really having some representation for all of the super talented, nationally recognized people that live here in town. I never really hear from them. We've all kind of connected over years and years of just whoa, you live here too? That's crazy. So I don't know, maybe getting people together, celebrating some of the talented and other geographically celebrated people that live right here. So there really, I guess when I get to the bedrock of it is there's a lack of celebration of the localism, and not just the celebration, but the support financially, spiritually for the artists that live here in town.
Much appreciated.
Sorry if I was a little long-winded.
Selectman Brown.
Thanks. Thank you for your application, Mr. Druin. So you mentioned the 25 years of failures, being able to see, learning all of that, having a scope of failures that help you sort of edge towards a win regardless. What are some of the best communities you've seen in terms of art support? Oh,
amazing question, Selectman Brown. And that is so cool of you to ask. So towns like Lowell, they have the Lowell Summer Music Series. And just in that town, I met a great man who runs the concert series named John Marciano, and he let us open for Bruce Hornsby, the B-52s, Bill Kreutzmann, Michael McDonald. The list goes on. And many of those acts, like Bruce Hornsby and the Range and Bruce Hornsby and the Noisemakers, took my band under their wing and brought us to Virginia, where we made our first gold selling record back in like 2008. And like, what a wonderful job they do at letting the local bands get a shot to play with the national bands, the huge legendary bands that everybody knows. And the same thing in Portland, where in Portland, Alive at 5 out in the center of town, and the Port City Music Hall, and just great people that always are like grabbing the local talent, like, hey, we're going to give you a shot. And around here, from like the Portsmouth area through this seacoast area, kind of ending around Hampton, because the casino often at Hampton Beach, they often give local bands a chance to like get in front of a big new crowd too. And I've, had a lot of reciprocal benefit from them as well. But in like Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where I sold out the Portsmouth Music Hall with my band and did a 12 camera shoot and released a DVD from the night. We did a $30 ticket, 900 tickets. And still in Portsmouth and the surrounding communities, whenever a national act comes through there's like a refusal to put a local artist on ahead of the band. But in Lowell or in Portland or in Manhattan or in Taos, New Mexico, or like in all these other places, like if you work hard and let the cream rise to the top, you can get those opportunities. But I've been living in this area for a long time. And not only have I not gotten those opportunities, it's almost like there's like a wall somewhere. I don't even know where it is. I don't even know, but I've been to like the Prescott Park concert series. I've been to like the Beer and Chili Fest a few times in town. I've been around here, and it just simply doesn't exist, like the involving of local people and local artists, when everything else is like locally sourced food, farm to table, locally sourced, volunteerism in regards to our government. Everything's local. And then the only place like the artists that live here in town get a break, not local. Does that make any sense?
That's fantastic. Just one question of clarification. What's a DVD? Thanks. Thank you so much for that.
Antiquated is what it is.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Hi, Mr. Druin. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for submitting your application. I don't know that I have any questions. I mean, your background certainly speaks for itself, and we're really lucky to have somebody with your certainly varied experiences offering to serve in town government.
Thank you so much, Selectwoman. I really appreciate that.
Selectwoman Gilman. Excuse me.
Hi, David. Thank you for this opportunity to meet you. My only question is that we've gone through, I don't know if you've heard the stories of the different iterations of arts organizations or organizing. And one of the problems that we have, and this goes for every board or committee that we have, is in the fundraising management of how events happen, particularly on the monetary side. And it sounds like you might have some experience with that, because because we're looking at, I really do want to promote local artists, and the kinds of things that you're talking about have been organized, I think, municipally, or it sounds like it. And I'm not sure that we have that knowledge base yet. And I was just wondering if you feel like you can, bring something about that to the table.
Yeah, I have a lot of ideas about that from someone who's started out like more than 2 decades ago doing DIY concerts and whatnot, do it yourself, for anyone who's not up on the DIY situation. But just prioritizing that, like the local art scene needs to be celebrated and supported. Once that simple notion that is spread all throughout our food and our sustainability committees and everything that we do with localism in regard to our community here that we all love so much. Once that is fully given to the artist here as well, then we can start building that financial and kind of community trust that can support and help events happen, obviously post-COVID or like in some form of recovery mode. But having my own siblings run like pretty successful businesses here in town. I mean, going around to like the Provident Bank, Ohana Kitchen, communities, all these connections we have, and having them like donate towards like the art scene that is happening right here in our little neck of the seacoast. That would be, once you get the bedrock of this is an important thing, and we're not going to ignore that we have a whole bunch of national celebrated artists living here. Once that is stamped into stone, then the plans to like support it financially, support it through events, support it through like donations from like the businesses in town and whatnot. That all seems like, you know, I've seen people already doing that. Some nonprofits here in town already getting stuff like that done. But it's just like that wall of making that notion of like we're here and we're important in ways like that. I think that's the wall we got to break through.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
David, thank you for your application and for your time this evening. We're going to conduct some further interviews, and then at some point we'll be deliberating. But again, thank you for your interest, and it's nice to see you again.
It's great to see you. Thanks so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Good evening. Okay, and our final application is Marissa, and I'm sorry, is it Vitolo?
It's Vitolo, yes.
Vitolo, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for your interest in the committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you would, again, take a couple of minutes to tell us about yourself, your interest, and then we'll ask you some questions.
So I am originally from Houston, Texas, and I'm an art educator. I moved here about 8 years ago, and kind of like what Dave was saying, was really looking for an art scene, a music scene, especially since I've worked on several nonprofits before I moved here that were directly in support of art education, music, local art. And so I was kind of surprised to not find much of that going on here. So I joined where I could. I helped out where I could. Been part of Main Street Art. I got a job. I teach at a high school in Kingston, Sanborn Regional High School is where I teach. I've been part of the Youth Art Month that we have in Exeter for several years now. I work with the Parks and Rec this summer, or like I guess in the spring and May, to help bring art to after school, like remotely to kids. So I feel like there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of talented people here, whether it be through writing or music or performing arts, any of those things that I feel like definitely need more support in, whether that monetarily or just getting the word out. And so I feel like I want to help out and make that happen as soon as possible.
Terrific. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Questions from the board. Selectwoman Round-Triola.
Thank you, Ms. Vitolo, for joining us. Just a real quick question, same as I asked Mr. Druin. What's one thing that you would love to see change, that would broaden the arts and cultural scene in Exeter? If you have any ideas, would love to hear at least one of them.
One of the first things I felt like I noticed we were lacking here, and I wanted to get started when I moved here years ago, was like an art market. I joined one in Dover pretty much immediately after I moved here, and it was very successful. It was a weekly market, and then the Chamber of Commerce took that over. Concord also has one that I joined. I feel like that really gives a lot of artists, because it's not very expensive, a place to be able to sell their work and be supported by the community. And they get their face out there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same artist each week. So you get to see a lot of different people, and a lot of different people get to come into the community. Also, we don't have a lot of, like, I know Dave mentioned something like, and we do it over at Sawbelly where there's music, but there's not like a town monthly concert in the park or something like that that celebrates all the local musicians. There's no slam poetry. There's no spoken word. None of these things are really happening that are sort of like tied into the town. Also, as an educator, we have an immensely talented group of young people here that we only give them a place once a year through the Youth Art Month. And what else can we do as a town to celebrate our young people? So I think that's important also.
Thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
Hi there. Thank you so much for your application. And thank you for your work that you do with our students. It's really, really important. I know my son had a picture displayed and he was so proud. I think we went and saw it 3 times.
Yay.
So no questions. Loving your ideas and glad you applied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Selectman Brown.
Thank you. Question, since you're an educator, the combination of COVID time, arts, kids, health, mental health, do you have any perspectives on that to share?
On the mental health point of it, like bringing like art and music, oh my gosh, art therapy. Yes. I mean, there's so much we can do. I mean, even if it was in town, and I know it'd be safe, but like having a drum circle or bringing people in to do, like I've seen at the Equinox Festival where they do like yoga with music playing. Like I believe like, we could do some initiatives like that in the town, definitely, to expose more children to different cultures through music, through dance, and also to help them connect with each other through art, all of these things. Yes, I think there's definitely a big component to mental health and education and art and music and all of that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman.
Hi, Marissa. Thanks for volunteering. I had just a couple observations and then a question. We actually have had the slam poetry thing go on, and the high school's usually done it. And this year, I don't know how they're doing it or not, but we've had a couple of award winners from Exeter High, which is nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So my question really is, some of the things that you're talking about, like drum circles, and I really like your idea of the art markets. I think that those have been really nice, the ones I've seen. But there are things that are happening in the community, but are being done by specific groups, like a church or the Rotary Club or something like that. Do you think some of that is just a matter of the communication of what those groups are doing, or are you looking for the town to be the sponsoring body or the organizing body?
I think it could be a team effort. I think like the town could definitely throw their support behind something, but also get these groups maybe to work together. So like as the cultural committee, be a liaison between some of these groups to where if they have a suggestion of an artist or they have a musician or something that they want to have a stage somewhere or have the ability to connect with, maybe their church group has an art festival for the holidays and someone else has it on the same night. Maybe we could coordinate like things where we're showcasing one group, the next group, whatever, something through that, whether it be like through our social media or through a calendar or something like that. I think it could be a team effort. Definitely. I think we can combine it.
Great. That's great. That's great answers. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Selectwoman Gilman. Marissa, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for your interest in volunteering, your application. We'll be conducting some further interviews, deliberate, and we'll be back in touch with you. But thanks again for coming this evening.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our board interviews for this evening. We'll jump into the regular portion of the meeting, starting with public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to comment to the select board. We do ask that if your comments are pertaining to anything on the agenda, that you wait for that moment to comment. But if not, we'll open it up. I will pause for a few moments to see if any attendees raise their hands. Okay. Okay, seeing none. We'll move on from public comment. We do not have any proclamations or recognitions this evening, so we can jump into the approval of the minutes. If there are no revisions or amendments.
Sorry.
Yes.
Chairman, just really quick question. I don't know, are Parks and Rec going to be on the call later? I don't see anyone from Parks and Rec today.
Mr. Dean, go ahead.
I do not believe they are involved tonight.
Okay, so I'm just going to, can I throw this out there during a public comment then, and then hopefully we can bring it up at some point when they're on the meeting?
Sure.
Just something to consider. I don't know if the town has considered an ice skating rink as a possible activity or something to create over the winter, something similar to what Portsmouth has, because I know that we have, a lot of things that we're losing indoors. So I don't know if that's something that we could consider if there's a location for it. Just wanted to throw it out there as a conversation when Parks and Rec is here next.
Mr. Chair, just for informational purposes, there has been traditionally an area that Park Street Common that was flooded and frozen for ice skating. Not a huge area, wouldn't call it a rink or anything, but at least to get kids out to be able to skate a little bit around. It depends on the weather, of course. But it's still a good question to know if, when we're going to do it next.
All right, especially if we have the Parkway closed. I'm throwing it out there for something to consider because it's going to be a long winter. So
I think it's a great suggestion. Mr. Dean, could we have Greg Bisson and Melissa Roy look into this over the next few weeks and have them come on the December 7th meeting?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent suggestion. Thank you. Okay. So if there are no revisions or amendments to the meeting minutes, I would look for a motion to approve the Exeter Select Board regular meeting minutes of November 9th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
The clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we interviewed Cammie Switzer at our last meeting for the Human Services Funding Committee for a position on that committee that has no term. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to appoint Cammie Switzer to the Human Services Funding Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
The clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you again, Cammie, and welcome to the committee. Okay, we're going to move on to discussion action items. Given some things that have broken over the last couple of weeks, I asked the town manager to move the COVID-19 updates from the last discussion item to the first discussion item. So I would open it up. We have members, department staff here. Chief Wilkin, once again, you're in my direct view, so good evening, sir.
I'm always in your direct view. I don't know if that's good or bad, but and I will say that being top of the billing is not a good thing to be when you're talking about COVID-19, and for that, the news is not great. It's not anything we want to constantly report on. But I appreciate being able to be here with you. Wish the news was better, but since we last met, there have been over 5,000 residents of New Hampshire test positive, 1,000 here in Rockingham County. And the numbers keep getting worse for Exeter. We had 36 residents test positive. The good news side, and I keep trying to paint a good picture, is things we've done in the past, initiatives that you took the time to do, including the mask ordinance, I honestly feel has paid a dividend. And our numbers are now very close to being the lowest of all communities in the top 20 population in the state of New Hampshire. I've been watching other communities and cities just grow, and we've been chugging along at 1 or 2 people a day. We don't want to see that, but the numbers have not been what some of the other communities are. So my hat's off to you, and the residents and citizens of Exeter are doing everything they can to keep this virus at bay for as long as possible. I know the manager has a bunch on his plate, so I'm not going to step on a lot of the stuff going on townwide, but I will just mention quickly the Department of Health and Human Services, along with the Department of Safety, have offered an initiative to all first responder organizations, and they've nicknamed it FROST, or First Responder Optional Screening and Testing. And what that offers is monthly screening of the rapid test at no cost to the community, and they're looking for as close to 100% participation from an agency. They're obviously looking for numbers to make sure that we're catching things quickly. And what would happen with this, and I think it was in the packet, was that if an employee tested positive on the rapid test, the 15-minute test, they would be taken offline immediately and go further for the standard PCR test. That's the test most of us are familiar with, either the swab in the nose or the cheek of the mouth, and it's unpleasant, but that test would be used to confirm the rapid test. If it was confirmed positive, the employee would be out for the standard isolation quarantine, 14 days, 3 days after symptoms, on and on. If it's negative, the employee comes back to work. So I offer that. The state has offered, Chief Paisan has enrolled us, if you will, so we're not behind the curve. But I just look for yours and or the town manager's guidance. My only concern, and I'll preface this by saying, the earlier we find out, the better we all are. That way we minimize interaction with the rest of the crew, and we can pull people offline before we lose an entire shift, or worse, a huge segment of our response force. But having said that, the numbers I hear from the test, the rapid test, indicate that anywhere from 30%, some even higher than that, of false positives and false negatives. And it's a little concerning to go through the process of having the test, pulling somebody offline, miss a shift or two, fill, only to find out 3 days later, because we all know the PCR tests are taking a significant amount of time to get results back, that it was negative. Again, great news, but in the meantime, we've lost the productivity, lost the employee. So I just think we need to weigh the positives and the negatives of it. And if we feel there are enough positives, then we are poised to take advantage of the state program. And I just, the optimum word in that sentence was optional testing. It is not mandatory. Each community will decide on their own. So I'll pause there for any comment or questions and see where we go.
Do you have a recommendation, Chief?
Yeah, having said that, the earlier we find out, the better. I honestly think we will be sorry if we don't take advantage of the program. In light of what's been happening in other town agencies, I hate to say it, but it's only a matter of time before somebody in my organization test positive, and then they become the direct exposure. We've had dozens of people since March out for 2 shifts, 1 shift, because they have been caught up in a isolation quarantine because they were in the same area, or they transported a patient, or they have a loved one that tested positive. And until we could get our personnel tested and they test negative, they've been offline. This gives us an opportunity to find out as quickly as possible. And yes, if they're positive, they're positive. We deal with the fallout, and we will continue. I'll say this cannot end soon enough. If there's a vaccine on the horizon, we're all certainly looking forward to it. But so I guess mine would be, we should move forward. We have an opportunity to bury our head in the sand and say, I don't want to know the results, but I don't believe that's in the best interest of my organization or the town of Exeter.
Sure. Any comments or questions from the board members for Chief Wilkin?
Yeah, Chief, thanks for the update. So is it the PCR test is the rapid result test?
No, the rapid test is that the antigen test? I didn't bring it with me, and I'll have to defer to James to bail me out. The PCR would be the confirmation of the rapid test. The PCR is the standard test with the nasal swab that detects the virus in your sinuses.
There's that false positive, false negative number I'm looking at. Can you speak more to that, or just repeat that? Was that 30%?
I've heard numbers as high as 30%, and some, depending on who you believe, even push it to 40. But generally, the state is producing statistics in the area of 30%. And like I said, I see James on, and I don't want to contradict anything if he's hearing the same thing I am. So you have the correct info.
Absolutely, I agree. The specificity of that test, so basically, if you are positive and you take the test and it says positive, it throws very few false negatives, but it does throw false positives fairly often. I believe the 30%, what the chief was referring to, is pretty accurate.
Okay, and are there other options of tests to purchase, or this is what the state has provided? Are there any other avenues to a better a lower false positive percentage?
I'm not aware of any, and so the short answer is this is what the state is offering, but the long answer includes I'm not aware of anything else that would be of the rapid nature, and the whole idea of the general premise of this is to capture as many asymptomatic positives as possible. Obviously, if an employee is symptomatic, they are already calling in sick because they have flu-like or cold-like symptoms, and we don't want them in the firehouse. So the asymptomatic people that continue to work, this test can pick up those asymptomatic employees and send them for further testing. But as James corroborated, the problem with it is, the only negative I can see of it is that false positive for the next 2 to 3 days, we're all on pins and needles waiting. Is this our first positive, or did we, avert a crisis and it's just another negative? So I guess you take the good with the bad and hope that, we don't have a lot of false positives.
And as well, the question is also, a test that's providing false positives is likely to provide false negatives. So just basically looking at what the state has, it's just an open query about possible other vendors for a testing, because you definitely would rather have false positives than false negatives, but 1 in 3 being false positives mean how many, it can speak to the lean of the test, but can also speak to the quality of the test agent. So it'd be interesting to see if over time we can seek out, or if it makes any sense financially or otherwise, to have a more viable, something that's more accurate. Again, because 30% in any scientific study would be, insane. So.
Agreed. No issue. That's why I'm not all in. The discussion is more.
I pray it's just false positive. That's a huge margin. Yeah.
Well, I pay the news. I honestly pray the news we hear nearly every night on the news is accurate, and looming right around the corner is emergency authorization for a vaccine that healthcare and first responders and those that are most vulnerable have access to in a very short amount of time. 2 to 3 weeks is standing news, but let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Selectman Brown. Selectwoman Cowan?
Thank you. I think that Selectman Brown brought up some good points, but I also want to ask James one more time about the false negative piece, because it sounded like what you said, and based on my, pretty rudimentary understanding about all of this, is it doesn't actually produce false negatives. It's just the false positives. And if there is a positive, we can then follow up with a more reliable, longer test. And I would much rather be overly cautious, especially with our emergency management personnel and the really important function that they play in keeping our residents safe.
So to speak to that, there are any test, there's sensitivity and specificity. And so one is the amount of false positives you have, and one is the amount of false negatives, and they're not necessarily connected. So my understanding with the antigen test is it tends to throw more false positives, but it's not known to produce many false negatives. The rapid test so far has mostly been used for people that are already symptomatic. With symptomatic patients, it's very accurate. With asymptomatic is where you get the false positives. So in this case, I don't think you'd see very many false negatives at all, if any, but false positives are a possibility with this test for asymptomatic people.
And so then just to follow up, then what would be the harm in sending the asymptomatic false or positive test to have a longer, the regular test that will definitively say yes or no, and just, sort of remove them from the force while you're doing that?
Right. With, I'm sure the chief could speak more to this. With a rate like 30% for false positives, you could potentially be taking a lot of the workforce out that are absolutely not positive. Those could all be false positives if you're losing, let's say, 30% of a shift. Again, the chief can speak to it better than I can. That's quite a big sacrifice if they all turn out to be false positives.
No, James is absolutely correct, Molly. My only concern was that is that from a productivity and state is that to lose 2 out of 6 people on a shift, and if they're positive, they're positive. I agree with you. The earlier notification, they're offline, and they're less likely to infect others on shift or in the station or the public that relies on us to help them. So, but yeah, the false positive has the possibility of taking them offline for a period of time. You throw a number, 2 days, 3 days. We've had town employees tested recently, and it can be 5 days, depending on the backlog. I think the backlog has been artificially created due to the Thanksgiving break, and a lot of people looking to get tested to travel. That may not continue as the Thanksgiving break wraps up, and then we have a pause before Christmas. But we'll have to see how that plays out. But if we can get results 24 to 48 hours, then we can get somebody right back to work again, and we're good. I think we need to know. I think we need to find out that information and take advantage of the program.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, if you could explain or remind me, in the memo, I think it says this program from the state would give us free tests, but they're free for once a month, one test a month.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Julie. The idea from the state was to just get on a regular basis. They're going to provide the testing once a month. Currently, only those employees that have had contact with a known COVID patient or family member have been tested at all, and it's been pretty much the PCR test. So this is just a program they're trying to push out to all emergency response organizations monthly. We can choose how we want to administer it. Those departments that have jumped in, some of the largest cities in the state do 1 quarter each week, which we have 4 shifts, and kind of makes sense that we would have somebody come in, we test an entire shift. There'd be 6 or 7 people. Throw in a few staff members like myself, Chief Pizon or James, and submit those, and we get those results. A week later, we do B shift, then C, then D, and we revolve right around that until we wrap this pandemic up. That's the offer. That's the way we probably do it. In the meantime, anybody that's symptomatic, we would take offline as we have for the last 7-8 months. And anybody that's had a known exposure, and James is right on top of those, we send for the standard PCR test, either the hospital or a vendor like Community, Convenient MD.
Okay, thank you.
So, Chief, understanding that there's no cost to the community, but if they're only testing once a month, it's only good for that day, correct?
Sure, I defer to James to see. That could be argued about the PCR test as well. If just because I was exposed on Sunday to a known COVID carrier doesn't mean on Monday I can go get a test and I'm going to be positive. We've been really doing some research, and James has found in his circles that the general norm would be a number in the area of 4 to 5 days after exposure. Okay, I agree with you. It can be a huge number out from exposure before you even yourself test positive on a PCR test. It depends on the human. It depends on our immune system. So yeah, but you're right. It's that day. It's that second. It's that snapshot in time. That antigen test is you're negative or you're positive, and you move on, and then we do what we've done. And I'll repeat it: we monitor for symptoms. We take temperatures every day for everybody that comes in the firehouse. So we get a general health screening of all of our employees every single day. But we only see them 2 days a week as well. So they're off at home, and they come back to work. So that the cycle repeats.
Right. So far from being perfect, it is something. It's at no cost to the community, and it's optional. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, eventually when we get to Principal Rawson, think perhaps he's like the expert among all of us on testing and results. So maybe we can inquire kind of what they've done at PEA and sort of the stats on that, since they've seem to manage it so well with the low numbers. If we have time for that, not to put you on the spot, but it could be helpful.
Well, Principal Rawson, you're next on the agenda, but would you like to, since it's relevant, would you like to jump in? We're putting you on the spot, maybe tell us about your testing at PEA.
Yeah, so we've had a good experience. Very few false positives. I actually think with the antigen test, there's quite a big article in the New York Times about this recently, about what percentage of positives caught by the PCR test would be caught by the antigen test. And there's a little bit of controversy. Some people say a very low percentage, and some of 30%, some say 85%. But we're using the rapid antigen test and the PCR test in combination. This fall, if you look, remember our COVID dashboard is publicly available, so just Google Exeter COVID dashboard anytime you want. We've had, I have some numbers here, 6,527 student tests. We've had 6 positive. 2 of those were at home before the student traveled, because we require that they do a pre-travel test. 3 were as they arrived. So in the fall, students coming from what we thought of as a high prevalence area were tested before they got out of their car, before there could be any close contact. And 3 were positive in October. 2 went to our health center. 1 turned around, went home for 2 weeks. We've only had 1 positive that might have occurred on campus, but this was a student who came from Florida in early September and was symptomatic about 10 days later. So it's my guess, but we'll never know. It's my guess he picked it up on the way. So we've had very good results, and we've had, we've had a single false positive. And I talked to the heads of other schools, and they have had some false positives, but we're talking about 3 or 4 out of several thousand tests, not a high percentage. So on the employee side, we've done 2,067 tests, 10 positive. About half of those were fairly recently, and they were adults not living on campus, but coming to campus to work. Again, I'm not sure that any of those are false positives. So I was quite worried about false positives back in August, preparing for the fall, because I thought about just how it would be disturbing to people and upsetting to people to have a lot of positives. And we just have not had that experience. So we certainly have consistently gravitated toward more testing, not less. And the more testing, I think, because the point about it's good for the day of is obviously a valid point. And maybe it's for anything that could have happened in the previous few days. You could be, where virus built up, but the more frequent, the better. But any testing gives you an opportunity to catch some asymptomatic people. I would not shy away because of false positives. I would recognize that you may be missing a lot of people because somebody could be positive but not yet have a sufficient viral load. So I would be worried about false confidence in the results, but I would not worry about false positives. And I actually wrote to our medical director during this conversation to see if there was anything more that she would coach me to say. And so she just has sent me an email. And she's agreeing with me that the false positive rate is quite low all around, antigen and PCR. But she said the false negative rate for the rapid antigen test goes up for asymptomatic individuals. You know, we typically use it for a symptomatic individual to confirm right away that the person in fact is positive. I actually think the false negative, we'll test somebody who's symptomatic with their antigen test. Positive, you go right into insulation. Negative, you still go into isolation potentially, but then we'll get the PCR test to feel like between the two we have 100% confidence. So I hope that's helpful, and I'd be very happy for our medical director, who is, you know, anything I say is what I've learned from her. Happy to have her talk to anybody who might find it helpful to talk to her. We've been enormously grateful for our partnership with New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services and the Exeter Hospital and Portsmouth Hospital, and if we can be a partner in return, we're very happy to do that.
No, that was very helpful information. Thank you. Selectman Brown, did you have a question or comment?
Just to take you up on that offer, so the false negatives for asymptomatic, that would be of enormous benefit, I think, for the chief and for the rest of the town. But
yeah, so,
as much as you could share on that would be great.
Okay, try to follow up on that.
So we have a recommendation from the chief. Are there any objections from the board members to at least proceed initially with this optional initiative that the state's offering?
I have none.
Do you need a motion to make that happen, Chief?
I don't think so. Honestly, I just wanted full transparency, you know, with Russ and you that we're willing to enter into it. We'll have our people do it, and we will be, forthcoming with the results. Obviously, Russ and I communicate daily, so he'll know any of the positives and why we took somebody offline and what we're doing, and we'll deal with it. And let's just hope over the next few months that this is the final few months that we will be we'll need to do it. But absolutely, no, I don't think a vote is necessary, no, my opinion.
And you'll keep us updated, Chief?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
One last thing before I yield to the rest. On a good news note, hopefully you've noticed around town the Christmas Light Committee has started their decorating. The town hall is starting to take shape, the bandstand, and you'll start to see other things as we move along, and I look forward to continuing that. But if anybody has anything to share, feel free to contact me at the firehouse or Beth DePel, whatever. But look forward to the day we get to flip the switch.
Great. Thank you, Chief. James, do you have any updates for us?
Yes, actually. I'm sure everyone knows about the state mask mandate that was put into effect. It does not look like this does anything to our mask mandate. There's still kind of a suggestion that any communities that do have mask mandates can keep theirs. So that's something for the board to discuss. There was one thing I noticed with this state mask mandate that I liked that wasn't really included in ours. And it's been brought to my attention as well under subject F, any person who is deaf or hard of hearing, and any person while communicating with an individual who is deaf or hard of hearing, or who has a disability, medical condition, or mental health condition that makes communication with that individual while wearing a mask or face covering difficult would not be required. We have an exemption in our ordinance, but I think the wording I used was, it was very limited. I think this is much more inclusive language. Maybe we can consider adopting that into our ordinance. And also there's a whereas statement that we have in ours that whereas, just off the top of my head from memory, whereas New Hampshire is the only state in New England without a mask mandate, we should probably remove that statement as well.
Does the governor's order supersede our mandate?
We do have it written into a couple sections of our mandate that it does supersede.
Okay. Mr. Dean, where the executive order supersedes our mandate, do we as a board, do we need to change the language in ours, or are we just going by what the state mandate is?
I don't think the answer is absolutely clear to that question as of yet. So maybe what we'll do is at a staff level, we'll get a conversation started about and look at that specific issue and see if we can make a recommendation. It could be that if we have things in our local mask ordinance that aren't in the state one, it may be that we are able to keep those requirements. But I don't believe we've done well, James has done an analysis, but we have not kind of come around to, an answer to that question specifically.
Okay.
So
we'll do
real
that.
quick, I see section 4 of the state mandate. Nothing in this order shall be construed to prevent municipalities within the state of New Hampshire from enacting their own ordinances related to the wearing of masks or cloth face coverings that contain stricter provisions than those contained within this order. So I think that would protect most of what our ordinance is.
Okay.
So much like a zoning ordinance, basically. Adopt greater restrictions.
Our mandate is through 12/31, and I believe the governor's is it mid-January, Mr. Dean?
That's a question for Mr. Murray.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Would the board like to revisit the language in our mask ordinance and take that up at the December 7th meeting?
I would. I think that, I don't want to be saying something that is inaccurate, like we don't have a statewide mask ordinance. And I like the more inclusive language that James indicated. And it would also make sense to see if there's anything else that we wanted to include or remove from our ordinance now that we have some additional protection from the state.
I'll say yes.
So, James, if you could send us, much like we did the last time, if you can send us your recommendations, and then each of the board members can individually make our suggestions and send them to you individually, and then we can take this up on December 7th. But in the meantime, between the governor's order and our current mask ordinance, everything would stay the same.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions for James? Okay, Mr. Dean, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, away we go. Obviously, it's been a difficult last week or so. We did, as was reported out publicly, we did have a positive test in the town clerk's office last week where the employee began exhibiting symptoms. We were able to, the days are running together lately, so yeah. As far as the case goes, it is a serious case. There's no question about it. And so we're monitoring it very closely. We believe, so that's on everybody's minds right now. We have had to make adjustments at the town office. Obviously, I can't say enough about our team and how they've helped respond to this. Between James, between the chief, my assistant Pam, Jeff Beck, our maintenance superintendent, Greg Bisson and Melissa Roy. We'll talk a little bit about that next. The communication involved with a situation like this has to be extreme and wide, and everybody has just done a fantastic job backing me up and giving me the support that I need through this process. So I really appreciate that. So basic bottom line is we had to close the building for a few days at the town office. People got tested, including myself. I'm happy to report I'm negative, so glad for that. We have the town offices reopened as of today. Sorry, again, the day's running together a little bit. Town offices are open today, except the town clerk's office. Obviously, we still have issues there. We have 2 people in quarantine right now. And we will have the town clerk back tomorrow. So the offices will be open from 8 to 1. Since she's the only employee that really can work in there right now, we have to limit the hours. But so that is that. Once we had the COVID hit, we went into emergency cleaning mode. We had ServPro come in and do a deep clean of the town offices. That was accomplished, and that was done as quickly as we could do it. And basically, everything was deep cleaned, so that was completed. Again, varying degrees of contact tracing. James did a great job again. We do our own contact tracing. He took the bull by the horns. We did the direct exposure. We tried to find out everything we possibly could about the employees' interactions with others, and that was successful. And most of the tests that have come back from within the building are here. We've gotten the test done, and we've gotten the results back. Generally speaking, it took 3 to 4 days to get those results, but we still do have people that are waiting for a result. So the length of time that has passed has been quite significant since the hit. So that speaks to the testing program and some of the complexities. I've had conversations with others, people that have gone and gotten these tests. There's lines out the door. There are people in cars. It took 2 hours to get myself tested from beginning to end, maybe a little bit longer than that even. I've heard some people have waited 4.5 hours to get tested at certain places. So with everything ratcheting up, certainly it's been a difficult challenge. But again, I want to say just my thanks to everybody, because it's been a great effort by everybody, and everybody's working hard to pull together on this and try to get us through it. I'm also having to report a positive in Parks and Recreation. One of our employees tested positive there. I want to make sure that everybody understands that person did not have any interaction with children in kids programs, as far as that's the latest report I have on that. The person's obviously out with the case, with the positive case, and we have had to shut the Parks and Rec building down as well as a result of that. We are having it cleaned tomorrow. I believe it's tomorrow. Same thing, ServPro will come in and clean the building, and then we are having people get tested. I will say the rec director and the assistant director were advised by James, he can confirm this maybe with a head nod, that they do not need to get tested because they had not had the kind of direct exposure that you'd have to get tested. So we will be okay there. James covered the statewide mask mandate. That's good to see. We're glad that something is finally in place on that. And we've been working through issues with First Family's Coronavirus Act, in terms of the COVID leave issues and people having to be out. And we're definitely focused on trying to keep everybody safe and healthy, and we're sanitizing, we're wearing our masks, we are, doing everything we can to try to limit any further spread of this.
Mr. Dean, if I could pause you for a moment. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf has her hand up, and I want to make sure that you don't jump to another subject before she can ask her question.
Okay.
I'm just curious. So the protocol that we have in place for positive tests, what happens to? Do we automatically then 2-week quarantine anybody who was within the same working area as the person who tests positive, or do they just take the test?
So what we've been doing is, and again, James can speak to this too. In fact, I will defer to James on this. James, why don't you talk about the town clerk's office and how we handled that?
Sure. So depending on the individual's exposure determines what we need to do. So we kind of triage it based on how long the exposure was it a protected or unprotected exposure? So in cases where you're sharing close office space, a lot of the same, even maybe supplies going back and forth. If you're having lunch with those individuals without a mask, those individuals need to quarantine for 14 days. They can get a test if they like, but a test result will not change that. They still need to quarantine for the full 14 days. And if they're still asymptomatic by the time 14 days is up, they can return to work. Anyone that did not have a direct exposure, but was working in the same general area, we're having them get tested and can return to work with a negative test. So it's an added layer of safety just to make sure that even though there wasn't a direct unprotected exposure, those individuals are still getting tested to make sure they didn't pick it up, because they are still working in the same general area.
Okay, I'm just curious because I know that certain institutions and certain places of work have different protocols on how they handle it. I have a sister who happens to work at UNH, and I know that if there's a close exposure, it's an automatic 2-week isolation with or without a test. So she would have to be in isolation for 2 weeks, and then after the 2 weeks can get an antibody test. So I just want to make sure that, you know, that we have like the set protocol. We all know what's going on, because sometimes people don't quite remember the tracing of who was where and what time frame. And so that's my biggest concern with the small spaces in which we work for the town offices and other locations. So I don't know if that's something that can be a further discussion at some point, especially as you guys are saying that numbers are increasing. So, you know, to go from having a positive case both in town clerk's office and then a week later having a positive case in Parks and Rec, I just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to have as many people who are then go into full isolation mode. So there's not, like they shouldn't be out even testing. But, you know, I don't know if that's accurate or not. So I'm just going to put it out there for something to consider.
Yeah, I would say that there's a tremendous amount of communication going on behind the scenes on this, on everyone's relationship to one another based upon the situation. So we're literally taking person by person, going through, asking questions about who they've been around, where were they, did you have any interaction with this individual, you know, those sorts of things. So we're definitely doing that. And again, in this instance, the employee started showing symptoms at work, and that's really what happened. So we've also been hearing, you know, sort of a mixed bag on testing, meaning some recommendation, even I think our planner who's on the call tonight was at Convenient MD and told that they didn't want people tested until 5 days after a potential exposure, right? So we're sort of working our way through those issues, and they're difficult, and you know, it's hard because we want to be able to open the building and provide services to people, but we're also doing a really great job doing virtual services. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say the fewer people that can be in this building right now, the better off we are. So to the residents out there, if you can use virtual services, online services, you call our offices, we will facilitate getting things to you. And we really, you know, we are really saying right now with winter coming, if you really don't need to come in the building, please do not. We will have our doors open, but if you can avoid it, please do that for us. We would greatly appreciate it. And we will work extra to make sure that we can get you what you need, whether it's online, virtual, or otherwise. And we just had our tax bills issued as an example, and people can pay their bills online. Yes, there is a fee on top of the tax bill, but it is an option for you. And we also obviously have our Dropbox that you can use outside the building. So that's a way to, you know, a way to pay your tax bill without actually coming in and chit-chatting in the office and so forth. Again, we love the public, but we're just in a rare and unique circumstance here. So we're asking for people's diligence as much as we can. James had his hand up, I think.
Yes, just to add to that, going back to the situations that we're dealing with. For both situations, the first thing I did was contact the Bureau of Infectious Disease Control and got their input on what we should be doing for quarantining and testing. Also, it's important to note that these two situations are unrelated. So with at least one of them, we've determined the source and they're not related to each other.
So, Mr. Dean, on the Parks and Rec, I mean, you've spoken about the town office. How long do you anticipate Parks and Rec will be closed, and how does that affect any of the programs that are currently going on with the kids? Everything's on hold, presumably, right? Yeah, essentially. And you know, again, we take it step by step. First step is we need to make sure the building's clean. Presuming the director and assistant director don't need a test, you know, they can come back into the building. I know we are testing one other employee in there. There's 4 total employees, so the one other employee is getting a test, and so until that test result is known, she would be out.
So we are trying to reopen when we're faced with a situation like this. We definitely try to reopen as quickly as we can, but we're also very, very diligent about it. So again, we're just encouraging people to call, use online. If residents have questions about programs that we run in Parks and Rec and they're concerned about their children, call us, let us know, reach out to us. We're all available via email and by phone, and we're prepared to work remotely and work virtually so we can get to people. We have the infrastructure in place now to do that. So if people do have concerns about it, let us know.
So, Mr. Dean, just to follow up, I know when the first case in the town clerk's office, it was identified over the weekend. The office was closed. A press release was issued. The website was updated. You did the cleanse. You also notified any volunteers that may have been around the clerk's office during the election or leading up to the election. Have we done the same with the Parks and Rec? In other words, have we notified all of the parents who have kids that are in programs?
I am not aware that any email has gone out from Parks and Rec about that particular issue. So that's something we can follow up on.
Because I think as a parent, I'd want to know that.
Yeah, and certainly we have no issues with that. And again, I ask for a little bit of patience, because when something like this happens, you're basically in a fire drill. That's what's going on. And there's a lot that goes into it. So we know people will be concerned, and we will get to you, and we'll work on that, just so they know. The reason I made that reference to the kids' programs tonight was because I knew people would be instantly concerned that the employee had contact with children. So I wanted to make sure I made that clear. But we will get additional information out of Parks and Rec soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before Mr. Dean moves on, any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, Mr. Dean.
I think that's all I had. I just wanted to mention also that our offices are closed Thursday and Friday for the Thanksgiving holiday. So the last business day will be Wednesday. And again, for people that need to register their vehicles, which we had a line of people here today looking to do that, you can come in at 8 o'clock tomorrow. We'll be open till 1 o'clock. And again, we're just asking for people's patience because we expect the line to be fairly long, and we cannot operate at full capacity at the moment. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, Principal Roston, we'll return to you. Thank you for jumping in.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I needed to jump back in. Sorry about that. Okay. One thing I did miss, a very important thing, is that we have had a member of our planning board test positive as well. And so our thoughts are with him, and hopefully he gets well soon.
Okay, thank you. Principal Roston, thank you for your patience.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me this evening. Like everybody else, I'm trying to follow daily the course of the pandemic in the town, in the county, and the state, and we're trying to do everything we can to keep our school community safe and be good citizens in the town of Exeter and contribute to keeping the town of Exeter and the surrounding towns safe. I'm going to tell you tonight about our plan for the winter and the spring. Of course, everything is subject to the evolving conditions of the pandemic. As I described earlier when talking about our COVID dashboard, I think we've had a successful fall. We took a cautious approach. We had a staggered arrival of students so that we could practice and get good at what we were doing at half capacity before going to full capacity. And I think decisions like that have helped us, and we've learned a lot along the way. We will continue to take a cautious approach for winter and spring. And what that means is we've decided, and this, by the way, is public. Our plan for winter and spring is on our website. I promised to send this to Mr. Dean and forgot to do that, but I can still. But we're trying to be very transparent, so it's available for anybody who would like to Google Phillips Exeter winter COVID plan. I think it would pop right up. what we're going to do, we're going to take our spring break, which is normally the second and third week of March, and move it to the first 2 weeks of February. And students will learn remotely up to that point. So we start Thanksgiving break tomorrow. We have 2 weeks of our winter term. Tomorrow's the last day of our fall term. We have 3 terms during the course of the year. The winter term will start in December, and there are 2 weeks in December. Students will study at home. They'll be all remote. There'll be no students on campus. Then they'll have our winter break, and then the entire month of January, they will continue to study at home remotely. So they'll have 4 more weeks of remote instruction. Then they'll have the 2 weeks of spring break. And that takes us to the week that includes February 11, 12, and 13. And that's when we'll bring students back to campus. So this gives us time for the pandemic conditions, hopefully around the whole country, but certainly around this area in the state, to come down. And like the fall, before students come, they'll all take a pre-travel test. So they have to have a negative test to come back. As they arrive, every student will be given a rapid antigen test, not just students from so-called high prevalence areas. Every student, before the student gets out of the car or some will be coming from the airport by bus, but every student, as the student arrives, will be given the rapid antigen test. And at the same time, a nasal swab. And that'll be sent to the lab. That'll take 24 to 48 hours. So within 48 hours, I hope we'll have 3 tests for every student. Students, of course, who test at home positive will stay home until they get well. Students who test positive with the rapid antigen test as they arrive, and I hope there are very few, would go right into isolation. And during those 48 hours, all of our students will be wearing masks, keeping their distance. So if somebody else shows up, it's hard to have 2 negative tests that are both false negative. And we're going for 3 here. So hopefully there'll be nobody showing up with the 3rd test. That's pretty long odds. But we'll do all 3 of those tests. And then after that, we're going to test all of our students twice weekly. And we're going to test all of our adults twice weekly. So we're really increasing the testing. We're taking advantage of capacity that didn't exist in the fall. And we're going to a pooled saliva test for students and adults, which allows us to do much more testing at less cost, but the same reliability, the same specificity. And so we feel pretty good about that. And we hope it allows us to be a little more open what the students can do on campus. I will say, though, we think of the testing to some extent, it's early detection, but to some extent, it's really just confirming that all our other safety measures are working, that our students are wearing masks, that our adults are wearing masks, that we're keeping our distance, that we're washing our hands and doing all the other things we're supposed to be doing. All those protocols will stay in place. For our students, when they walk up for a boarder, when that student walks out of his or her room, mask on. As an adult, a faculty member, when I walk out my front door, mask on. So we're taking a very stringent approach to the use of masks. The students have trouble keeping 6 feet apart, but they do okay. When they sit down, they do pretty well. When they're standing, they tend to come together. I saw a group one night. I was walking the campus after dark. They saw me coming. They expanded like a galaxy, because they know. But it's just hard for them not to come together. But that's why we have multiple layers, because no one layer by itself is sufficient. But masks, hand hygiene, keeping our distance. We're a little more careful, not more careful, we're more worried about students being within 6 feet indoors. Outdoors is our friend. It's hard to transmit the disease outdoors when everybody's wearing a mask. Indoors, depending on the quality of the ventilation, riskier. So we're really trying to keep a closer eye and really help them stay apart when they're indoors. So to complete the plan, the students will return February 11th, 12th, or 13th. Then the winter term is 5 more weeks. Then we'll have a 4-day break between winter and spring term, but they'll stay on campus. And then the spring term is another 11 weeks, graduation on June 4. we have something called family choice. So the family chooses to have their student learn at home, or if a student can't get here because of a visa problem, we will support them remotely. And so some students may choose to stay home for the entire winter term. That means we could have 100 or 150 students, or maybe a few more, arriving at during that 4-day interval between winter and spring. But most of the students will have been here earlier. They will have quarantined earlier. And we're going to keep them here on campus for those 16 weeks. We're not going to send them out for 2 weeks and bring them back. We probably will keep them on campus literally, meaning not into town, for most of that time, but certainly for the winter term. We'll continue our approach of keeping our students out of town and trying to bring the town to our students. We've had a lot of functions where we've, brought in the ice cream or donuts or coffee or burritos, or we've tried to, and allowing deliveries of pizza and food to the dormitories. We tried very hard to bring the town on campus, but keep our students on campus and out of town. Our day students, by the way, I think they've done terrifically well. We've not had a single day student be positive. I knock on wood all the time. It's just like I should have gloves on or something. And I think our adults who are coming and going have been doing a good job, although recently we've had a few more cases with the adults, and we're going to keep our adult testing going while students aren't here, although it'll probably be weekly, not twice weekly, and then we'll up the ante when the students come back. So anyway, I want you to understand we're trying very hard to support the town, but by bringing the town onto campus, not having our students go into town. Maybe in the spring, if things really improve, that'll change. And if things really improve, I'd like to have interscholastic athletics in the spring, but I don't expect that in the winter. In the winter, I'm going to try to have much more rigorous intramural competition where the kids wear home, or half the team's home uniforms, half are away, and we bring in refs and we test them, and we let our top athletes get some film to send to coaches, to keep score and foul out or do whatever they want to do, but keep them on campus. So I think those are the main things, but the gist of it is we won't have students on campus from tomorrow until February 11. Over 3 days, we'll bring them back so that we can get the testing done, and then we'll have them here for 16 weeks. We'll probably continue during that time also to largely have a closed campus, meaning we're not going to have parents coming to campus. We're not going to have visitors to our alumni office, our admissions office. We probably will not have on-campus reunions this spring because we just can't bring all those people from around the country. So we're going to continue a pretty cautious approach that we hope keeps our school community safe and contributes to keeping the town of Exeter safe. And certainly want to continue to be good partners with you and grateful for your support. The quarantine unit, I'll say we used in September and haven't used since. We had that student around the 15th of September come in symptomatic, test positive. There was a second student who was symptomatic, tested negative. It was odd. They were in the same dormitory area, but it turned out to truly be negative. We had 17 close contacts between the two students, and we used the quarantine unit for that time period. But for the most part, the quarantine unit has been good insurance, but we haven't made much use of it, but we'll keep it there. We want to have that capability. I think those are the high points. If there are questions, I will answer them, and that might trigger some other thoughts. But I feel it's a pretty good plan that we feel if we can get the kids here safely with all the testing I described, we've got a pretty good shot at keeping them here safely and contributing to keeping the town safe. And that's the approach we're taking.
Well, Principal Rawson, that appears to be a very careful and deliberate plan. And your presentation was so thorough, you answered my 3 questions that I had written down. However, Selectwoman Gilman's hand went up, and then immediately after Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf's hand went up. So they have some questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Principal, for presenting your plan and what's has been successful and what has. It sounds like it's all been successful. So I really appreciate that from the town aspect because of the open campus that you have. And I think you really have done some good due diligence and are taking care of everybody, not just your school or your faculty and staff, but the town too. But I just was curious how the social distancing affects the Harkness table.
Yeah, it's very challenging. We made remote instruction, online instruction, I should say, the backbone for the fall. So for much of the fall, students have actually been taking classes in their dormitory rooms or for day students in the library. And it's in the last few weeks that we've begun to do in-person instruction. We have a number of Harkness tables fitted out with plexiglass dividers. And that's challenging. And it's challenging when two students are around the world, aren't even here, and how to include them and make it an equitable learning experience. So that's a challenge, and we're going to work very hard at getting a lot better at that in the winter. I hope to have much more in-person instruction in the winter because the students are desperate for it. They really want to be in the classroom. And then in the spring, I expect in-person to be the backbone. I expect us to have flipped by the spring. But it's been challenging. I will say that for the kids, this is a little bit more than you need, but sort of human interest. They tell me that it's not just being in class, it's just walking to class that means a lot to them. It's walking in and out of the building and seeing each other in that way. We miss, as I'm sure you do in your lives, all those incidental contacts. Like this meeting tonight, if we were in person, you'd be talking to each other on the way in and out, and we miss that as a faculty. So we're really trying to move in that direction, but the simple answer is until about 4 weeks ago, the instruction was entirely online with the students either in their dormitory rooms or in the library as day students. And it was part of we have the buildings here were largely built when we had 200 fewer students when I was a student. And I didn't feel it would be safe to have close to 1,000 students swarming over 2 or 3 buildings, jamming in and out of restrooms, sneezing in each other's faces in the hallway. So it's part of our cautious approach to start with online for much of the fall.
Well, thank you. I was just curious that, I know how the learning system works, and I was curious how if you're having like 2 kids in a room and 3 in their dorms.
We have these swiveling cameras. Some are trying to use Zoom. We're experimenting with different approaches. And of course, in the warm weather, I'd also like to see classes outdoors.
Right.
And we're with the labs, some teachers are taking a class of 14 and splitting it in 2 and using 2 classrooms where another classroom's empty. And some are saying, well, half of you are going to do the lab today, half of you will do the lab tomorrow. And when you're not doing the lab, you'll be doing a problem set. So different teachers are coming up with different approaches. So I appreciate the question.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Selectwoman Rantriola.
Yeah, just a quick question so that we're on the same page of providing assistance to the Academy. I assume that people who live in town still do not have access to the grounds of PEA, the trails, et cetera, so that we know what message to send when people are inquiring about whether or not they can walk on campus, what the protocols are.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's an oversight on my part. We are going to open up the trails while the students aren't here, and we're going to change the signage. We want people to wear masks. We don't want to be in the business of enforcing other people's behavior. I'm not sure exactly what the wording will be, but we really want people to wear masks. They're outdoors. We're actually going to have our adults on campus wear a mask when the students aren't here, just to keep it clean. When I walk by myself, I don't really think I need to have a mask on. And I used to carry it, and then I'd put it on the minute I saw somebody. And that's probably what some people will do in the trails. And we're not going to get into a confrontational posture. But we're going to open up the trails and hope people respect their neighbors and at least put a mask on as they encounter other people on the trails. We will not open up the library. Even our emeriti faculty have not been able to go into the library. We might open it up for them, but we won't make the library open for just we have visitors all the time who just want to see the architecture. We won't do that, but we will open up the trails. Tennis courts, I don't think we'll open up. We have to be a little bit careful, particularly if we're one of the few places in town, we could end up with a lot of congestion. But thank you for that question. Trails will be open.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
And Principal Rossin, before Selectman Brown asks his question, when is the date of the opening of the trail?
I think we'll have them open this weekend.
Great.
I'm not quite sure how quickly the new signs will go up, but we've all agreed as soon as the students are gone that we want to open them up to the members of the town community again. So, if somebody went out on Thanksgiving Day, they wouldn't be accosted. I just don't know if we'll have the new signs out that quickly.
Okay.
I'll make a note and try to follow up on that.
Thank you. Selectman Brown?
Yeah, I just wanted to, thanks for the whole presentation, but there was something you said that I'm not sure how we can use it, but it was a really interesting perspective that you treat and view tests as proof of the policies functioning. If you could just say that one more time. I think, again, you have the benefit of being able to close the fence sort of around your populace, but that is a great way to think about tests and policies and the relationships. If you could just say that one more time for the...
Sure. So certainly early detection is good, so that you can capture somebody who's asymptomatic before there's an opportunity to do a lot of spreading. But when we get tests back, let's say we just tested 500 students and they're all negative, it's also telling us that we're wearing our masks, we're keeping our distance, we're washing our hands. So, and I guess another way to think of it is we have to do all those things. If we don't do all those things, then the tests are going to show a lot of sick people. So we think of the test as a combination of early detection, indications that our COVID protocols are keeping us free of virus. And there's actually a third function, which is just reminding people that we're in a pandemic. Just the act of going to get tested, I think, reinforces in our students' minds, oh, there's a pandemic out there. And I think it does the same for adults so that we don't become complacent. So all three of those are benefits, but I do sometimes emphasize that it's showing the effectiveness of our safety protocols so people remember that we need to keep those going. We need to not relax them.
Thanks. And then thanks for repeating that, 'cause that sort of, I didn't realize I had a question. So then it's, so do you sort of informally or formally revisit the protocols if there is a positive or if there's a situation?
So far this hasn't happened and I hope it doesn't, but if we had a positive in a dormitory, this goes back a little bit to Selectman Rontriola's question. We will treat everybody on the same floor of that dorm as a presumptive close contact without doing any contact tracing. Just say, you're living on the same floor, you're using the same bathroom you're in, you got to get tested. And even if you're negative, you have to quarantine because the test might, maybe you just haven't built up the virus enough. Then we do some additional contact tracing to try to find out if they're close contacts elsewhere. If we had a situation where we had a positive in a dorm and 6 other people were positive, that would tell us these kids are not wearing their masks when we're not around. They're not staying apart when we're not watching. So that would certainly tell us we need to reinforce and reset expectations around safety measures and protocols. So we haven't had that happen yet, but certainly if we had evidence of spread, we do this first so people don't get sick, but the second so that, let's say a day student does come who's sick. We want that day student we want a transmission rate of less than 1. And so if we had a lot of positives, that would tell us our protocols aren't working or they're not being followed. And so happily we haven't had that yet. And by the way, I do talk to my counterparts at a number of the other schools on a regular basis. And none of the schools that I've talked to they've had isolated cases, maybe a day student. Nobody has really seen an outbreak evidencing significant spread because students weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing or adults weren't. And, we've had some adults positive and the close contacts all negative. So that's a good thing. It tells us that people are trying very hard, taking it pretty seriously. They may not be perfect. The kids may not always be 6 feet apart, but that's why you have multiple layers. That's why you have the mask. That's why that's why we're not, why we have the plexiglass in the classrooms, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sorry, my answers are longer than your questions. I hope I'm not going too long, but I hope it's also responsive.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Great. Any other questions for Principal Rawson? Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Your answers were perfect. They were not too long. They were informative and really gave us some good ideas and gave us a good idea of what you've been going through. Again, I think that your plan is very careful and deliberate. And I appreciate you continuing to come and update the board, and you're invited anytime. And we look forward to continuing to get updates from you.
I'm happy to come at any time. I appreciate the partnership. If I may take 2 more seconds,
please.
I wanted to thank Selectwoman Rantriola for coming to our school virtually. She was on a panel. We're doing some very important work around what it means to become and really be an anti-racist institution. And we have Thursday morning sessions for all the students. And Selectwoman Rantriola was on a panel that was really spectacular. I mean, it was really a spectacular panel and quite moving, I thought. So thank you very much for that. And I also...
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was really great. And I want to follow up. I think there's so many opportunities. Secondly, we've taken note on campus of the board's decision to change the recognition of October 12th. And one of our students has submitted a letter in support of that action, Emmanuel Brindamore, who cares quite deeply about this. And in fact, Selectwoman Rantriola, you mentioned this during your remarks. So it's a big deal, and I wanted to thank the board for taking that action, but also tell you that it's been very much noticed on the Exeter campus. And it was noted that our student made a positive contribution, and we certainly, and that was quite meaningful, not only to her, but to our entire student body and our adult community. So I wanted to thank you and recognize that as well.
Thank you. Thanks again, Principal Russell. We'll talk soon. Please stay well.
Hey, I have to go to a dormitory, so I'm supplying McDonald's to an entire dorm tonight. See, I'm supporting local business.
You're going to be a very popular person right now.
That's what I'm trying to do. That's how I get support. Food. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great. Okay, next we have a discussion. Mr. Dean, I think you'll lead this on the HB 1129.
Hi.
I needed to unmute. Sorry about that. So I wanted to share the screen just for a minute so I can walk through this with the board. And I will say I actually have some questions about this myself, so this may not be entirely 100% locked out yet. But I do want to go through this. Obviously, with COVID-19, the town meeting deliberative session process is likely to change because of those particular issues. And so this actually goes back to July of 2020. House Bill 1129 was signed into law that allows a different kind of town meeting, if you will. And just walking through the steps, basically, the governing body, under number 1 here, the governing body shall host a live virtual meeting and information session during which the procedures shall be outlined and warrant articles discussed. So that's the town meeting warrant. And then there's posting requirements. At least 7 days prior to the informational session, notice shall be mailed to all registered voters, describing the procedures to be followed for conducting an annual meeting pursuant to this section. After the live virtual meeting is adjourned, questions and comments from the public shall be solicited and received via email, voicemail, text message, or by other electronic means. And then we move on to the second part, which is within 7 days of the information session, the governing body shall hold another live virtual meeting to consider and address comments received from the public. The governing body shall then discuss, debate, and be permitted to amend the posted warrant. So obviously that's a significant change, because the board can make the determination about how to amend or whether to amend the warrant based upon the feedback and the comments that have been received. And then the final warrant as amended shall then be made available electronically for printing by voters, which should not be an issue. We can put it on the website, should be fine. By voters to be brought to the voting session, which shall be scheduled for a date and time to be determined by the governing body. So unlike the current RSA, which is set up to have our deliberative session the first Saturday in February, typically, this is an alternate process that allows the board to make the determination about the date and time of the voting session. So I need to get some clarification on that because it's a little confusing between traditional town meeting and SB2 as far as what voting session actually means, but I will follow up on that. Voting on final warrant articles shall be by secret ballot cast by voters through drive-up procedures to ensure appropriate social distancing. So in a town or district that uses the official ballot, that's us, for the election of officers, and has not yet held its town or district election. Again, this was back in July, so it really references sort of prior events. An official ballot will be printed for the election of officers and other items that are not required to be placed on the official ballot. All other warrant articles will be printed on a separate ballot, the alternative ballot. So I'm going to, I'll read number 4 here. The first article on the alternative ballot shall ask whether voters approve these optional meeting procedures. If the optional procedures are not approved by a simple majority, all other warrant articles shall be deemed disapproved. However, the election of officers and action on other items on the initial ballot will be effective. If the optional voting procedures are approved, then all other votes on warrant articles shall be deemed the final action of the meeting, provided that if the operating budget article is not approved, the governing body may vote to convene a meeting before September 1st to adopt an operating budget, or elect to deem that the meeting has adopted the previous year's operating budget article, not including separate warrant articles. And then finally, we get to 5, which speaks to SB2 specifically, and it says in a town or district using the official ballot referendum, SB2 form of annual meeting that has held its deliberative session but has not yet held its official ballot voting sessions, the governing body may choose to use the drive-up procedures in paragraph 3 for the official ballot voting session, and paragraphs 1 and 2 shall not apply. So if you look at number 3, I believe this is referring to the actual town voting. And so drive-up procedures are valid. Now, I will say that basically as we begin to think this through, right, we just had an election. We had people go through the election in the normal, it wasn't an abnormal day, of course, but had masks, had sanitizer, so forth. So we ran the election like we would in the normal scheme of things in a physical space. So the purpose of tonight really is just to get the board familiar with this and give you a chance to really digest it. And if you want to talk about any particular things that are relative to this, that's fine. We can have that conversation. But I also need to consult with legal counsel just to make sure that all the proper steps are followed, because this is really a change from, and again, this legislation was adopted in July. So basically it was adopted at a time when towns had to post. We got lucky in quotation fingers, because we had our town election, right before COVID really became an issue, right? So this was really created for towns that didn't have a roadmap when we were in a lockdown type situation. So it's a little hard to understand in different places, but again, we'll continue to look at this and develop a strategy, which we'll need to do fairly quickly on this particular process. Now, I do want to go down to HB 1129, planning and zoning. Again, I'm not going to go into extreme levels of detail about this tonight, because I did want to focus on the town meeting procedures, which are actually right here in the law. But there are other aspects to the law here regarding any zoning amendments that would need to be done as part of the typical town meeting process as well. So we're continuing to review that as well. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, in the event that anyone has questions.
Sure. Mr. Dean, what's the likelihood that this would be revised, since it was drafted or put out back in July and things have changed?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question, and it's one I'll have to And I don't know if Selectwoman Gilman has any more information than I do as a state representative, but I do not know. I have not heard of any changes in this. I do know, and I know one of us was going to report on it later, that the Supreme Court ruled that the legislature can meet virtually, and it's not a constitutional violation. So even if we were to have a deliberative session, if it were the preference, we could have it virtually. It would appear so, but it's an excellent question, and I think it's just something we need to figure out if this will be amended, updated, or otherwise.
Mr. Chair, I just want to give a little background, because if you look at the legal document, my name is on there as a co-sponsor of this bill. And when I co-sponsored the bill, it ended at the zoning amendment. And then all of the town meeting related stuff was amended through the Senate. So my committee didn't have input on that part, because by that point we weren't meeting as a body, and the virtual meeting things hadn't been worked out. So we actually didn't have a lot of input on this. But the gist of it is, the first part about public hearings is really just about noticing, and that there aren't many newspapers of regular circulation anymore, that there aren't any daily newspapers. And so we wanted to have it official, that we could, one of the places to use for posting a public meeting is the website, and it's legit. And but they wanted to also make it more prominent on our webpage, on web pages in general, so that it's right up front and you don't have to look at a menu or find a menu through the things. And then, so the rest of it came in, and it was basically aimed at those towns that have a regular town meeting, and also have a June to July, or July to June fiscal year. And so all of this was happening right in the time that we were shut down. And as Mr. Dean said, everybody was trying to figure out how to do everything. And we knew we had votes coming up, and, primaries and things coming up that we had to get a plan for. So that's how it kind of all got wrapped into this bill, because the timing was not right for the House, but was okay for the Senate, and the governor signed it. And so it being rushed like that, I think it does make it a little confusing about whether how it affects an SB2 town situation with a deliberative session. And as Mr. Dean said, what is that, the meeting? I think it is, actually. So I'm curious about how that would work for a larger town like ours, having the interaction with the public just be electronic or snail mail. That's something that we need to really look at, how we want to do that. But I as far as it being changed this year, I don't know. The deadline for bills being filed was Friday, so I haven't looked through them all yet.
Okay. So, Mr. Dean, have we looked into how we would hold a deliberative session virtually?
I have had some informal conversations with the town moderator, but we haven't had a chance, with everything that we've had going on, we haven't been able to circle back on it as of yet. But we hope to do that soon. We've had one conversation about it, and we've kind of speculated what it might look like, right? And how to, if you think about it, obviously the moderator is the chairman of the town meeting, so it's essentially a big meeting just like this one. And I presume that he could control as the host, he could control the people in there. I think one of the trickier parts would be trying to figure out or just confirm registered voter status, and which is obviously something you need to do to be able to get a ticket to vote at a town meeting. So I think that's something we need to consider, how we would do that. There might be a way to do it electronically and possibly do it that way. But that is a conversation to have with the supervisors of the checklist as well, to see, to get their thoughts. But we have 3 very capable people on our checklist supervisor board. And I know that they're very tech savvy, and maybe they could come up with something that would be workable.
There's also one other, I'm thinking about how the House does its schedule, and the crossover of House bills and Senate bills is at the end of March, I believe. So if this indeed comes up before the House or the Senate, it wouldn't be decided on right away, until the end of June, basically. So I think we're going to have to work with what this is. And unless there's a big push and we want to make the governor do this through an executive order, or get that done, because we really need to look at that. Your question about checking in the voters is a really valid one, because there isn't anything in here about that. So that's something for me to take to Concord Tuesday.
More to come.
Mr. Dean, what's the capacity that we could have? Would it be unlimited? Or
that's another great question. I'll have to figure that out with IT as far as how many we can actually support in a meeting. I mean, we typically get, it depends on the year, of course, but we typically get maybe, as you know, deliberative session tends to be a multi-hour exercise, right? So we have, at any given time, maybe at top attendance, it's around 100 people, maybe 150, just depends on what's being discussed. And then it sort of, as you know, it sort of filters out. If you have one big issue, it gets determined, and then people head for the exits typically. But
yeah, the only difference is, I mean, we see this in our virtual select board meetings, right? There are some, when we were meeting in the Novak room, there were some meetings where there was nobody but us there.
Right.
I think now, if people have the capacity, they're home. If we're still living, life the way we're living now, some people aren't going anywhere. I think you're going to find that attendance is going to be increased, and I think it's going to be prolonged, which is a good thing, but we need to be prepared for that.
Yes. Good points all, and I agree. I think with the virtualization of something like this, not to try to oversell it, but who likes to get up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday in February at 15 degrees, 20 degrees, and drive over to the high school? I don't know.
I always enjoyed it.
All right. Well, I enjoyed the drive too. Don't get me wrong. It was a nice little warm up to get to, the high school and see everybody. I like it too, but it's, your point is really well taken, Mr. Chairman. I really believe that if this is virtualized, you'll actually enhance participation. People will want to participate more. I could be wrong on that, but
now, mind you, I'm not advocating for it, because I would prefer the in-person deliberative session. But I think realistically, we need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I think you're correct on that. So we will continue to have those conversations and bring you back into it with our thoughts.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Dean? Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes. In speaking to the town moderator, has there been any discussion at the Secretary of State's office yet about this?
I'm not aware of any at this point. I think everybody was just trying to, as we know, we were trying to get through the last election in one piece. And then, but I would imagine these conversations will sort of restart once the things start to die down a little bit from the federal election.
Yeah, we could also actually get the history of the few towns that have the different election dates. They have their elections in May, or town meetings in May rather, and they're the ones with the funny fiscal year. So I don't know off the top of my head which towns those are, but we should ask them how it went and what they did for the. Well, they don't actually have to show a ballot, do they? Well, what their process was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would be in our interest to begin a conversation with some of the larger SB2 towns, like Goffstown is one, Hampton is another one that comes to mind, and kind of get a flavor as to what they're thinking as well on this, and what they might be doing. I know Hampton is a little bit, from my perspective, they do a little bit more in person than I would think is safe at this time, but it's definitely good to reach out to those other similar sized communities to see what their thought process is going into this next session. So we can do that pretty quickly. And NHMA, of course, as well. One of my next stops is to email Margaret Burns, the executive director, tomorrow, and begin asking them questions about this process and how it might look. So I expect to have some pretty good information even by the time the board meets on December 7th. We should be able to follow back up on this.
Good. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Dean. Good discussion.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have a follow-up on the asset management, stormwater, wastewater systems. And I think, Mr. Dean, we've got several guests tonight to speak to this.
We sure do. We have Matt Berube, who's our water sewer manager. We also have, I see Deb Lozelle. Sorry, Deb, is here with us. It's good to see her too from DES. Jen Mates is on the call as well. And Sharon Nall from New Hampshire DES is with us as well.
Great. Good evening, all. Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I believe Jen Mates is actually our consultant, Margaret Blank, from Underwood Engineers. So just wanted to clarify that Jen Mates is not here this evening. Thank you for having us. And yes, just as the title says, this is another presentation as a requirement when we do these asset management projects. We have a presentation to the board to show the pieces that are coming. And this is the stormwater and wastewater systems, and it's more the horizontal systems. So it's the piping that's involved with this. You just heard a presentation more on the wastewater treatment plant vertical side. So this is more the horizontal pipe. With me this evening, again, is our consultant from Underwood Engineers, Margaret Blank. And as Russ had mentioned from DES, Deborah Lozelle will probably be speaking as well to speak about the program. So Margaret will be giving the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation. We'll try to keep it as brief as we can. And if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So Margaret.
All right. Thank you, Matt. All right, I hope everyone's looking at a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
Yep. Perfect. Matt's already taken care of the introductions. I'm Margaret Blank with Underwood Engineers. This asset management project was funded by $60,000 in principal forgiveness from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And it builds on several projects that the town has already done, the latest being the wastewater treatment facility. The goals of the asset management program are to understand the condition of the town's infrastructure, identify and correct current deficiencies, and anticipate future needs. Most importantly, it provides a basis to estimate financial resources required to maintain, rehabilitate, and replace assets. And of course, an ongoing goal is to continue building on the asset management program going forward. The components of the asset management program are the vision statement, the asset inventory and condition assessment, level of service goals, critical assets and priority projects, minimum life cycle costs, long-term funding strategy, how are you going to put your capital improvement program together, implementation plan, and communication plan. Our vision statement for this project was to integrate data sources and leverage available information to coordinate and streamline reporting, support decision-making, and optimize system performance. And just to put it very plainly and simply, we wanted to tame the data. When we first started the project, the town uploaded over 5,000 files to our client portal. So a big part of this project was wading through everything and putting all the information together.
Just a couple of highlights on taming the data. I understand this probably isn't most people's cup of tea, but unique asset identification numbers for each asset, every pipe, every structure. Correct and update existing mapping, which was actually in pretty good shape, and create resources and tools that the town can use going forward. We made some map books, financial planning spreadsheets, ArcGIS tools, which just provide a way for an easy way for staff to do updates and calculations. And we mapped record drawings and tie sheets. This is just a quick example of the record drawing file. If you click on these yellow highlighted pipes, this window pops up and you click on the attachment. There's your record drawing. And this is helpful for staff. Level of service. We included, some of the typical items. A lot of these have been included in prior asset management programs. But of course, something very important is timely response to customer concerns. And for that, you need adequate staffing and training, and you need a consistent process and adequate follow-up. Actions that ensure reliable service, making sure that your system is performing like it should. Excuse me. Minimizing breaks and backups in the sewer system, and minimizing local flooding and sinkholes on the stormwater system. Actions that ensure financial resources. On the sewer side, that's setting appropriate rates. And on the stormwater side, that's setting an appropriate tax rate and funding drainage infrastructure appropriately. We added, as part of this asset management program, actions that improve data collection, integration, and management. So that means periodically reviewing asset identifiers, using maintenance and inspection information that's collected throughout the year to update the asset inventory on a regular basis. Typically, this would be done at the start of budget season. And use ArcGIS to coordinate projects between departments, the highway department, drainage, sewer, water. A lot of people don't realize how big of an investment they have underneath their feet. I estimated that the replacement value of the sewer system assets, and these are just the horizontal assets like Matt said, this is the piping and the structures. The replacement value is about $112 million. And the vast majority of that is the gravity mains at 92 million. A lot of these assets are very long-lived. It might sound like a lot to schedule them out over 100 years, but a lot of these assets have useful lives of around 75 to 100 years or more. And scheduling them out helps you kind of look over the next hill. You don't have anything coming up immediately, but in 20 years or so, a lot of your assets are going to be coming to the end of their useful lives. And because there are multiple replacements over that time period, the estimated replacement cost over 100 years is about $128.4 million. So it's a little bit more than today's replacement cost. And that works out to about $1.3 million per year. On the stormwater side, the replacement value is about $91.2 million. Again, your pipe makes up a large percentage of that, about $66 million. And there's another 3.5 million or so in culvert pipe. Over 100 years, the estimated replacement cost is 121.2 million, or about 1.2 million per year. So you definitely need a way to identify the critical projects and prioritize them. So we used a scoring matrix of probability of failure versus impact of failure. Probability of failure takes into account the condition of the asset, the age and material of the asset, and the capacity. If you have an undersized pipe, you would need to replace that regardless of its condition or age. The impact of failure is a way to quantify the consequence. If there is a public health and safety concern, such as harm to water quality or damage to a roadway, that is going to have a very high impact. Another component of that is how many people are affected, or is it one major customer? This is the criticality matrix. It's just graphing out probability of failure versus impact of failure. Your highest risk obviously has the highest probability and impact. The frequent monitoring is a kind of a strange shape, but that one, if there are kind of moderate defects, you might want to keep more of an eye on those. So that's one part of the frequent monitoring. The other part is assets with a very high impact of failure. They may be in good shape, but you might have a very big problem if they should fail. All right, financial planning. For these first two items apply to both sewer and stormwater. For financial planning purposes, it's a good idea to annually review revenues and level of service goals to make sure that inspection, maintenance, and asset renewal needs can be met with the resources available. And the other item was balancing in-house CCTV inspections with the use of a specialty contractor. Right now, the sewer department does all its own CCTV inspections in-house, but the stormwater department also needs to do that as well. And CCTV inspections is for cameraing sewer pipe or stormwater pipe. On the sewer side, the operating budget and staffing is sufficient to complete the monitoring and maintenance tasks that have been identified. But there does need to be an adequate asset renewal budget set. The estimated annual need, like we said earlier, is about 1.3 million. That is based on full replacement cost. It could come in lower. With proactive maintenance and repair, you can extend the useful life of certain assets, or you can use lower cost renewal methods like CIPP lining rather than full replacement. The current capital improvement plan includes 1.5 million for gravity main renewals and additional gravity main and sewer structure projects, which are estimated to be about 2.9 million. That's 4.4 million total, or about 900,000 a year. On the stormwater side, there is a concern about a lack of resources to complete monitoring and maintenance tasks for the stormwater pipe in particular. The asset renewal budget should be around 1.2 million. This again is based on full replacement costs and might come in lower. On the stormwater side, there is a decent amount of corrugated metal pipe in the system, and that has a shorter useful life than other pipe materials. In the current capital improvement plan, there are about 2.2 million worth of stormwater projects budgeted, or about 432,000 per year. The last part of the asset management program is implementation and communication. On this project completed to date, we've updated existing GIS files and created additional GIS files. Suggested next steps include publishing maps online to share with the public, enhancing the utility of the CCTV inspection software, that's the pipe inspection software, with Microsoft Access, and streamline the coordination of pavement evaluations with utility upgrades. I think we might have some comments from DES.
Great, thank you for that presentation, though. Matt, do we have panelists?
Yeah, Deb or Sharon, did you want to say anything at this point?
Yes, sorry, I had muted myself. My apologies. Getting used to all of this. So I just wanted to say thank you, Matt, and good evening, Russ and Mr. Chair and the members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here representing New Hampshire DES. As you're aware, both myself and Sharon are representing New Hampshire DES this evening. And I have to first start off by saying it's been a true pleasure working with the staff at the town of Exeter through this actual project. And we hope this won't be the end. We'll continue to be available to you. So on behalf of DES, first of all, we'd like to applaud the town for taking advantage of utilizing a clean water SRF loan with loan forgiveness to develop a really robust asset management plan for both stormwater and wastewater. As Matt and Margaret had mentioned, this is a continuation and build upon to the vertical wastewater program I think that you all had heard about fairly recently. So this is going to help you now and in the future to plan better financially and to ensure that you have the best investment with your infrastructure. I'm sure the numbers that Margaret showed you were pretty alarming, likely. But hopefully, again, it allows you to really look at this holistically and start to plan out into the years. I'd like to give a special thanks to Margaret for all the work she did to guide the town folks with developing this asset management program, and to all of you for providing the support to those who provided the very well needed information to make this program so successful. But I think an extra special thanks needs to go to Jen and Matt and Jay, who really imparted their knowledge and invested a lot of time to make sure that this is going to be an extremely beneficial tool for all of you in Exeter. And again, not only now, but looking into the future. This is a living program. I'm sure you've heard this before. So this is not the end. It's actually just the beginning. And it's just a reminder to continually reevaluate because things will change, and just to be able to, talk amongst each other as the years go on and as necessary. So keep up the great work. DES is really impressed with the work that you've done thus far. We'll continue to be available, so please feel free to reach out to us. And most of all, have a wonderful holiday. Be safe and be well. Thank you.
Thank you, and same to you.
So yeah, that concludes our presentation. If anyone has any questions, as you can see, there's a lot of work behind the scenes. And then as we get these nice asset management projects, there's a lot more work for us to do too. So if anyone has any questions.
We do. We have Selectwoman Gilman and Selectman Brown.
Okay.
Who's first? Should I go first?
Daryl, why don't you go ahead? I'm still stumbling with my fingers.
So just the technology question, the 100-year span, is there any sense of technology improvements during that time, including basically looking back to see, do projections like that miss significant improvements in technology that might make things cheaper?
Let's hope so. Typically the 100-year look ahead comes in handy for towns that have, say, a big block of assets coming up in 25 years. When it's a really large amount of money like that, you definitely need some lead time. And so that's where it's useful. I expect it to change dramatically every year. And I've set this up so it's very simple for staff to rerun the numbers based on new cost information or just maybe even a new configuration of the system or new technology, as you mentioned.
Got it. But it's based on the current, on whatever current or near current stormwater technology. It doesn't project in changes in stormwater.
Correct. The idea is this will be updated every year.
Got it. Thank you.
Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question had to do with the ArcGIS drawings and sharing them with the public. And I'm glad Mr. Sharples is on the on here too, because I thought we were actually already doing that. Because I know when I go to look up a property, I can look up where the telephone poles are and sidewalks, and I thought I could see storm drains anyway on the map. So if I could just get a clarification of how the teams are working together, as I would like to see them, that would be good.
I think for clarification, it's just a matter of taking this data and updating it, Julie. You're absolutely right. Maps Online is showing those utilities already. I think it's just taking Margaret's data and plugging it into ArcGIS and pushing it out over into the public to see. So we haven't done that yet.
Dave, did you have anything to add?
No, that's perfectly said by Matt.
Great, thank you. Mr. Dean?
Yeah, I really liked Selectman Brown's question about the technology aspects of how we might better leverage technology in the near future and down the road a piece to sort of save money. And I know in reading some of the things that you see in other parts of the country where they're beginning to use more advanced technology for things like sewer sensors and with climate change and issues like that, and basically predicting sort of what will happen under certain algorithms. Like if it rains for 10 hours at X drops, I'll just call it that, inches of rain or whatever, you can actually use the technology to predict the surge into your system. And I'm wondering how much of that you utilized when you developed this report, and how much did you actually take that into account?
I didn't take that into account. That wasn't in our scope as much. This was more about what is your inventory today? What condition is it in based on the information available? And kind of setting a planning number. What should we be looking at? It's definitely not $0 a year, and it's not $1 billion a year. So we're trying to, give you a target, a reasonable target, and manage expectations.
Could a second, just to follow up on that, could a second grant application to New Hampshire DES include those kinds of things that I just mentioned?
Hi, Russ. It's Deb. So I think if you may be able to do this not as part of an asset management program, because right now there's only one phase allowable for stormwater. However, that being said, I think advancing it and talking about some of the technologies that you're looking at for stormwater, I would suggest that you look into a clean water SRF loan for a planning project.
Thank you. I had thought about it in terms of sustainability as well.
Yeah, this is Sharon now. I was going to say that too, those planning grants are up to $75,000 or planning loan forgiveness. But there's also, if you're looking at mitigation, there are some funding programs through Homeland Security that our Seacoast, you're covered under the Seacoast office. Natalie Morrison in our DES office out there is very well versed on those programs. And there's the BRIC funding, as well as there's another one, and the combination. We were actually trying to get a grant with Seabrook in this year, or an application. Couldn't make the deadlines, but so that would be next year, and it's an annual pot of money.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Great. Well, thank you all for the presentation. It's very informative, and we look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, our last discussion item is a follow-up to our last meeting. We have Mr. Sharples, our town planner, and I think Bruce Mabry's here as well, who presented. And if the board recollects, they went over the different options regarding the impact fees, and the board wanted a couple weeks to review them, come back and make a recommendation to Mr. Sharples to take the next step to go to the planning board. So I'll open it up to the select board if they have any comments or questions or recommendations. Mr. Sharples.
Sorry, I would be interested in hearing recommendations from both Dave and Russ.
Sure, I can do that. Can I first ask Exeter TV to make Bruce Mabry's on as an attendee? Could you make him a panelist? He is one of the three attendees, and it says Bruce Mabry. But while he's doing that, as I wrote an email to Russ, I said if the board is looking for a specific recommendation, I would recommend moving ahead with option A for both the school and the rec fees. That is the lower. There's an A, B, and a C option. And though A is the lowest, but as Bruce probably could explain better than I, my understanding is the A is built kind of off current spending. So it's I think, the most defensible. He feels that his recommendation A or B, you could go with B, but or C if you make capital expenditures in the future. But I would recommend going with A to start, and if we spend more capital funding and make some significant investments over the next couple of years, we could always revisit and choose a higher option fee at that time when we've actually, made a vote to expend the funding. I'll also is Bruce on yet?
Yes. Did we move Bruce over yet?
While we're waiting for him, because Molly asked the question, I'll just say that I agree with Dave. Certainly, I think going with A makes sense based on current spending, like he says. And I think the important part will be once this new set of fees gets put in place, that as we sort of update our rec spending and look at spending more money in that area, that we look at adjusting the fees again. So we just do it more frequently than we have, since this has been 10 years in the making, I think, at this point, since we've had a comprehensive update like this.
That's helpful to hear. I mean, I always want to have the least impact, especially during a pandemic. So it's helpful to have that validated. And then if Bruce is on, it still looks like he's an attendee.
I was going to say, is there any way, can we bring Bruce in as an attendee?
I can see if I can get that to happen.
Just, I don't know, we've got, if Dan can work on that for us.
In the meantime, I'll also say those of you who've digested the fees, there is another, as I said about the zoning amendment, that's a separate issue. We're not discussing that tonight. But in there's also charges for potential options for charging for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, which are an additional unit in a single family home in Exeter, which are allowed in certain areas of Exeter, but they generally don't generate the type of impact or school impact particularly, and they could be subject to a reduced fee. I wasn't going to get into that kind of thinking here, because we were going to put that as a percentage in the ordinance, not set the fee, just put it like what Mr. Mayberry recommends and just follow that. But when we come back to officially adopt the fees from the select board, then I'll explain that in further detail. But we are looking to provide exemptions for age restricted housing and ADUs and smaller smaller 1-bedroom units and studios. And I still don't see that. Is there an issue with?
Well, is there a way he can join us from the attendee? It would be like somebody calling in, or
he's there and he's in the attendees now, right, Bruce?
Yes. Yeah. No, he's been there. Yeah.
Sorry. Here he comes. Hello, Bruce.
Hello. I don't know if I have video yet, but
we can hear you.
Okay, there we go. Oh, almost. I got a big B.
Bruce, good evening. Thank you for your patience.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So I don't have an icon to start the video for some reason, but I can hear you okay. So.
Okay. If it's possible, could you, Mr. Sharples was talking about option A. If you could speak to that just briefly as to why that's the recommendation.
Well, I didn't make a specific recommendation, but I think I always tend toward the lower of the fee options. I think they're just easier to defend. So I had said A or B would be fine. I think they're just based on some more conservative assumptions in terms of the capital costs in both the school and the recreation. They'd also be much simpler to update in the future if we were looking at, periodically going back, as Russ mentioned, and trying to update the fees. They are also easier to index into the future if we get to that point. And so we've gone now, it's been actually 17 years since the original fee fees were developed. So that's quite a span in time, and kind of a big sticker shock, of course, when you go from 2003 cost basis to 2020. So I think the lower end costs are probably the better ones.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board for either Mr. Sharples or Mr. Mayberry? Then if there are none, I would entertain a motion for Mr. Sharples to make a recommendation on behalf of the Select Board to the Planning Board.
Mr. Chair, I'll struggle at a motion. I move to recommend to the Planning Board option A of the impact fees as presented to the Board of Selectmen November 23rd. Sorry. Thank you.
Did I hear a second?
You did.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sharples, and thank you, Mr. Mayberry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving into regular business, we do not have any abatements, credits, or exemptions, nor do we have any permits or approvals. So Mr. Dean, we can go right into your town manager's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier tonight, we talked about the positive test that we had with COVID in the town clerk's office. And I wanted to, I got my days a little confused perhaps, and I just wanted to make sure that people knew that the actual date of the positive test was Friday the 13th of November. So it was actually 10 days ago. And we've been in a mode of reacting, of course, since that time. And then the Parks and Recreation positive case was reported out, I believe, on the 22nd. So it's a more recent case. And I just wanted to restate what James had said, which is the two cases are not related. We do not believe they're related. So that's good to know. The tax rate was set last week. Actually, the rate was finalized on November 12th, and the new total tax rate is $24.49 per thousand. The town share is up 20 cents per thousand. I think I had reported on that. So we did hit our target. We do expect the bills to be out soon. Again, the whole process has been challenged by sort of the recent events that we've been dealing with COVID-19. DRA was certainly later than they normally are in getting our tax rate set. We had to do a little bit of pushing behind the scenes with NHMA to really get DRA moving faster, unfortunately. And there were a few issues with that, but we managed to get through it. And so people should see their bills out there soon. We are actually getting a lot of calls about people wanting to pay their bills. So I think that's, we talk a lot about the local economy and the economic factors of what's happening in town. That's a good sign that we're getting those kinds of calls. So people are anxious to get their bills paid. It's great to hear that. The Budget Recommendations Committee completed their process last week. So they wrapped up with CIP. It was quite a long meeting for those of you who had a chance to check in on it. So they will issue their findings, if you will, their recommendations. I believe Chairman Kelly will come to the meeting on the 7th of December with the board and report on their latest recommendations. We have been working with the Conservation Commission on a water supply initiative, basically water supply on conservation land. And so DPW and Conservation have been interfacing. Obviously, if that kind of thing bears fruit, it would save us quite a bit of money in acquisition cost of land dealing with groundwater. So hopefully, the fingers are crossed there. It's It's typically a very good synergistic use when you have conservation land available, because it's obviously aquifer protection, it's a buffer, and it just makes a lot of sense. So those conversations are going to continue between the departments, and I believe DPW is also, excuse me, going to go to the Conservation Commission on December 8th to have that conversation with the commissioners. So that's something for the board to be aware of. I think it's a very important conversation. I've been working with Selectwoman Gilman on some sump pump legislation. So she and I have had back and forth on that. And the concept there is to establish a revolving fund to allow for private systems that are set up with your sump pump. If it goes into the sewer, which is actually forbidden by our town ordinance, it would allow us to sort of begin to generate a seed money program. If the town were to adopt it, we could put $10,000 in this account and then allow people to access it to promote getting their sump pumps out of the sewer system. And then they would pay us back like a revolving loan program. So we'll see what the legislature has to say about that. But it's been great to be able to work on that. It's been 3 years probably, Selectwoman Gilman and I have been talking about it. So it's good to see it going into the mix. Pam wanted me to remind you that there are warrants in the mailbox, so please come in and sign them. I know she's very diligent about emailing the members and having you come in and sign. So I wanted to point that out. I will say that NHMA had their conference last week, and it was virtual, and it actually was very, very good. We were able to attend from home or a home office. We were actually closed because of the town office situation. So I was able to Zoom in virtually, and I thought it was actually really well run and very efficient. And one of the best features was we could watch the seminars sort of on demand. So if you wanted to go to a certain presentation, you weren't really held to the physical space of walking into a room with 100 people at a certain time. You could basically watch it at your convenience. And that was I thought it was a big improvement. Definitely missed people, but it definitely changed the feel and the flow of the conference. It was very well done. The Exeter Police Stakeholders Committee is beginning to set up their meetings as well. I know Chief Poulin's been keeping me on the line about that and just coordinating that. So I know that they're getting up and running. And then the final thing I had was I just wanted to recognize Chief Poulin as well, because he put together a use of force policy that passed the DOJ Police Standards and Training Council. So he did a really nice job with that. And as a result, we are going to be eligible for federal grants from the U.S. Department of Justice regarding use of force issues. So that's exciting news, and hopefully we can leverage that. And that's it, Mr. Chairman, unless there are questions.
Any questions for Mr. Dean? I have one. Were the seminars at the NHMA annual meeting, were they pre-taped when you say you watched them on demand, or were they live and then published somewhere?
So what they did is they used a combination of the two. Actually, the keynote was actually really, really good. And the other thing is we were able to have more employees access the meetings as well. And the keynote was a leadership seminar. Was very well done. And it was very popular, and it was done via Zoom. So basically you zoomed in on a link and participated in the session that way. And they actually had breakout rooms that they used with the Zoom. So, different pieces of the seminar, you get to go meet other people in a breakout room and go through that process. So it worked really well. And then, as I said, a few others were pre-recorded. Okay. So it was really a mix.
Great. Thank you. Select Board Committee reports. Selectwoman Gilman, you're unmuted, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, I thought I was doing well. Had a Conservation Commission meeting. We talked about e-bikes, electric bikes being used on the trails throughout our trail system, and that they're causing some harm. And then so there's some talk about putting up signs to prohibit them. Is what the commission decided was the best thing to do. but there's different kinds of e-bikes, like ones that you pedal to get energy going and then ride along, and ones that are just straight out battery charged e-bikes. So there's some discussion about whether we need to make any kind of difference. And then there's some plans for some kids hikes over the winter out into the woods to find any wildlife or see anything new. So we can get people out there. The Energy Committee talked about EV cars, electric vehicles for the police department. Nice to see that there's one proposed in the CIP. So they're very encouraged about that. And then further discussion about the community power, aggregated power that we're still trying to get into we're letting some other people take the lead on that, so we don't have to make new rules. The HDC talked about building 28 Front Street, which had started doing some re-siding with the material and in a manner that was not in keeping with the house in the committee's early hearings, but we're going to have a site walk to take a look at the condition of the property and the materials that were proposed. And the last thing is that the House is having their orientation day on December 2nd. Still plan to be at UNH in a big room with social distancing and masks and whatnot. Aside from the bill that Russ spoke about, I also put in one for the Department of Revenue Administration, which may be important to all towns this year, allowing for quarterly tax billing. So we don't get the big hit in June and the big hit in December. It's generated from a town that had found itself suddenly with like $10 million in surplus money because of audit problems over a number of years. And so they were concerned that their people were going to get a really low tax rate one year, and then it would be bumped right back high the following year when reality set in. So, and this will work for all towns to be able to do that, not just ones with a percentage of drop. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
The Housing Committee canceled their last meeting on the 13th, so haven't had any meetings since. So we were good.
Thank you. Selectman Brown?
I had an initial meeting with Chief Poulin, Deputy Chief Monk, and Selectwoman Cowan about the upcoming committee meetings. We just set up some first draft of ground rules and where we're going with that. And that was the only meeting I had. I missed my communications committee meeting and facilities. So.
Okay, great, thank you. Selectwoman Cowan?
Yep, I had planning board, and I'm trying to remember what we did. We talked a lot about a lot of things. But boy, does it feel like a blur. The minutes will be available next week, though. I wanted to note one thing about the Parks and Rec and the COVID case. So when there was a known contact, Parks and Rec did actually send out an email to the children who could have potentially been in the building. And then when there was a known COVID case, they sent out another email to, offer to cancel the remaining classes and offer a partial refund. So that communication did happen. And we will hear more about it officially tomorrow night during my Parks and Rec Advisory Committee meeting.
Great, thank you for clarifying. And I did not have any formal committee meetings other than I attended all of the BRC meetings. Mr. Dean alluded to the wrap up the CIP last week, which was long, but it was good. And we'll look forward to Chairman Kelly presenting the budget recommendations to us at our next meeting. Correspondence, the only piece of correspondence we had in the packet this week was from Comcast with some important information and price changes, some increases. I guess the timing's perfect for that. Reviewing the board calendar, again, we meet again on December 7th. And then finally, our last meeting in 2020 will be on the 23rd, unless something comes up where we have to schedule something. But we don't have any non-public. I would just like to wish all of you and town staff and your respective families, all our citizens, a very pleasant, safe, and healthy Thanksgiving and long weekend. And let's stay safe and just everyone stay well. Before we adjourn, any comments or discussion from any members of the board on anything we didn't touch upon? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan. Aye. Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.